But no, I'm saying there's evils that exist that God doesn't want, and I'm just wondering if these evils that occur, are they bad enough to prevent? Because if they're bad enough to prevent, then God being all good is going to prevent them, because you've already committed yourself to saying, oh well, God, yeah, there are some evils that God.
Yeah,
God
but then
being all
we just get
God being all good, being in his nature, doesn't negate the fact that he's also long suffering, meaning that he allows things to happen for a certain period of time, and eventually he's going to act in judgment. We see that throughout Scripture. So
Which
God doing that, and if you see throughout Scripture, you will also see that the things that happen that occur, actually other people come from those type of situations, and they become a greater good. If you actually realize that, right? For example, right, you have certain things that have occurred in regards of history, that there was something that was traumatic that it had an experience. God will allow that to happen for a certain period of time, so that a person that's coming from that situation could be a beacon of light for hope for other people. God does that all the time.
Okay, so the situations where that happen, it seems like those situations should not be prevented by anyone. So you could.
So what I'm saying is, those situations that happen, it's like this, right? Those situations that happen have suffering, and in those moments of suffering, in those moments that suffering occurs, God uses that suffering in regards to help other people launch forward in other opportunities and other things of that nature.
Right,
so everything that happens, God still uses for his glory, no matter what.
Right. So the evil wasn't like, it's clear that God is trying to bring forth something that with using those evils, right?
So the issue.
So those evils should not be prevented.
The evils that are not prevented are for a purpose that we do not fully grasp or understand. For example, let me ask you a question.
They should have occurred, though.
No, but how do you know that? What is evil for you? What is evil, and how do you know that's evil?
Yeah, we need to circle back to the original question
that actually isn't irrelevant. So let me explain why it's not relevant, right? So the reason why that's not irrelevant is because evil based off of you is based off of your subjection, based off of what you think, based off of what you know, but you don't know everything.
I'm basing it off of God.
You're basing it off of what you think God is saying.
We've already kind of established this.
You say you're basing off of God, right? So if you're basing off of God, and if you're doing an eternal critique, then you must take in the concept that he knows all things, and you must know that he's doing it for a purpose.
I'm granting that.
Then why are we having this discussion if you're granting that?
Hold on, Jack.
Because he's saying evil and God's will are illogical. They cannot coexist. They are contradictions. That's what he's saying.
Let Jack go. Let Jack go.
The issue is, can God...
But the issue that you're saying that, right? So if God...
Sean, let Jack talk.
The issue is just, can God achieve that end without that evil obtaining?
Obviously, it couldn't. It would be illogical.
But then if he couldn't, then there's nothing undesirable about it.
That's not true.
No. So
the lack of other goods that come from suffering would be something to be desired. So I think there is something missing even from a
the point about desirability is that when we say something is desirable, right, that means that it's better that it obtain than not, right?
That's not true.
No.
That's just plainly not true.
Well, that's how the argument...
I could desire to have crack cocaine, right? But that desire doesn't mean it's better that it obtains if I have crack cocaine.
I'm talking about by God's lights.
Well, by God's
the problem is you're talking in vague platitudes that don't really make a whole lot of sense whenever you get into concrete details.
I don't care about any opinions you have, right? I just want you to address the point. The issue is by God's lights. By God's lights. Look, I said I'm talking about by God's lights, so it's not relevant.
I think the
right?
same principle
By God's
applies,
lights, if something is desirable, right, that means it's better that it occur than not.
So I think the same thing applies.
So the question is, by God's lights, right, what's undesirable about these things that are being called evil, right? If he wants them to obtain because they're necessary for bringing about some greater good, that's the issue.
But they're not necessary.
Can I make a point here?
I asked whether they were necessary, right? And I was given the answer yes. If they're not necessary, then the problem is, why didn't he select the better course of action?
Because it's not up to him.
Better course of action contingent.
Yeah, I got an answer for that.
It's not up to him. It's up to
let's let AC. He's a new level head in this. Let's let AC talk. I want to hear what he has to say.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
So good, wonderful, man.
Good. Glad you're doing good. Me too.
Great.
I just want to make a distinction in my view because I'm coming more from the Eastern Orthodox view. So our definition of evil would be more a negation and withdrawal from the good. And this
Not relevant. Not relevant
It
here.
is
'Cause what
relevant.
we're no. I'll tell you why it's not relevant. I'll tell you why it's not relevant.
Can I finish my point here?
Oh my
I'll tell you
God.
why it's relevant, and then you can speak and reply back to me.
My point is,
Okay, so-
Alex made it this whole time.
He is right, it's not relevant.
Is they allowed to talk?
No,
So-
We don't
It
we
is
don't care
relevant.
about the ontology, right? We're just interested in addressing, right?
No, because it's
Look,
relevant. You want to finish the point, or do
Oh
you need to
my
just keep it from
God!
being
Oh
put up
my
so you're
God!
not
I'm trying to
gonna-
prevent you from wasting everybody's time with nonsense.
It's not a waste
Right?
of time. It's
The
not
point
just-
is,
we let
look-
you talk, bro.
Oh
It doesn't
my
fit in
God.
your syllogism.
Oh my
And the
God.
definition of good
Hey,
evil
let him
here
talk,
is that
man.
level of cosmic
Look.
order in which free will is not
Look,
all
what we're
important from a
concerned
libertarian
about,
stance.
what
Jack,
we're,
shut up.
Jesus Christ, what we're concerned about, right, is a notion
I
of
know what
evil.
we're concerned about, and I reject
Yeah.
your position. I'm not granting you your
Look,
position.
I don't
I'm
care
saying
whether
this
you grant
definition
it or
is
not, right? Then you're just changing the subject.
Bro, you can't even allow it to be spoken.
I don't want you to waste our time with considerations
That's
of the
an assertion.
ontology.
Jack, you're
Oh
wasting
my
our
God.
time because
Jesus
you're not letting him
Christ.
talk.
AC, wait, AC, are you going to just
Be quiet,
explain the
and then
ontology?
rebut. Be quiet, then rebut. The point is here that, first of all, it's not necessary for God to allow evil to do a greater good. He gives choice. Choice, however, is not all-encompassing. So when we put forward this libertarian view of free will, that it would be evil to not allow any free will at all. The point here is that God has a hierarchical set of values. And free will is important, but it's not like the only thing he has to allow. It's not an all-or-nothing fallacy that to take any free will away violates him, but he allows free will. The implication is that to make a world in which nothing bad could happen and no one has free will, it would be bad, yes.
Wait, in virtue of what?
Also, can I just add on to what I was trying to say earlier? Try to add on
Virtue
to
of
what
what
you
would
were
it be
saying.
bad?
Also,
Why
in
would
a-
Sean, don't interrupt.
Of love.
In virtue of what would it be bad?
Why would it be bad to take away all free will? Because that would be like total enslavement of everything.
Wait.
No,
All
because it
we're
wouldn't be
talking
love.
all we're talking about is taking away the capacity to do evil. Does God have free will?
God
So-
can
so-
allow
so that-
what he wants to
That's a
happen.
yes or
If
no
you don't-
question.
No.
It just contradicts the nature
Just
of
a yes
love.
or no question.
It's not.
Does God have free will? Yes or no?
You
No.
can define
You're
what
talking
is a
about-
yes
you're
or no
talking
I just want an answer to that question. Does God
I'm
have free
answering it
will?
right
Yes
now.
or
If you
no?
want
Yeah,
me to
yes
answer
or no?
it,
Yes or
answer
no?
to the
Yes or no?
question.
Yes or
Answer
no?
it. You want to tell me it's
Yes,
yes or no?
yes,
Answer it
yes,
right now.
yes.
It's a metaphysical
Yes.
category that doesn't fit into a binary yes
So
or no.
does he have? So
Hey, House,
look,
why do you keep muting
there's
me,
a
brother?
property, free will, right, that you ascribe to humans, right?
Yeah, limited free will.
What do you mean by limited? I didn't ask anything about limited. I'm just talking about free will.
I'm qualifying what it means. So there is a definition here. So we want to get it right.
Is
correct?
there such a thing as free will?
There is limited free will. Yes.
Wait,
That's
I
based
didn't
upon
say
choice.
anything about limited free will. I'm just asking, is there such a thing as free will?
I'm saying there is limited free will.
Any kind. Is there any kind of free will? Any kind at
Yes,
all?
any kind of
Okay,
free will
yeah,
there
so
is.
there is free will. Okay. Does God have it?
Not to the point he can violate his own nature, but he
I'm
does.
asking you what.
He
Look,
can
just
make
does he
choices.
have free will? Yes or no?
No, it doesn't fit
Yes.
into your binary, dude.
My God.
I gave you my
You're
answer.
just completely
I
fucking
gave you my
useless.
answer, dude. And you
See,
can't
like
even
Trey,
accept
I don't know
it.
what
But it
are
has
you
to
supposed
fit
to do
within what
with
you can
people
knock
like
down.
this?
I don't know why you wouldn't answer the question. Maybe Logic Bear, he's way better at answering these questions.
So the point is you're limiting his answer. It's not a simple yes or no question, and it's whether you want to define that or not is irrelevant to the fact. If you want it to be yes or no question, that's fine. It's not a yes or no question whether you like it or not.
Yes.
I don't know what you're talking
Let's test
about.
this.
What he's saying,
Andrew,
it,
Andrew, do you have free will?
Does-
I have limited free will.
yeah.
What is this limited thing? We're not asking about limited. We're just asking whether there's free will of any kind at all.
If you are asking,
The answer is yes,
If you're
and-
asking a Christian a specific question, do you have free will? In our Bible, our belief follows the fact that we have limited free will. Then why would I say?
I don't understand why you're talking about limited free will. I'm asking if
Because
there's
that is the
any
whole
kind
point
of
of
free
this
will. It could be chocolate free will. It could be vanilla free
Jack,
will.
wait,
It could be
hold on.
limited.
Just for
It
the-
could be
just for the
unlimited.
sake
Just
of the
any.
thought experiment, Jack, I'll say yes.
Hold on real quick. Jack, this is freaking annoying. If he says limited free will, and you say, oh, do you have any kind of free will? He just answered the question. Limited free will. Like,
But why
here's
is he
your problem.
saying limited free will? All I'm asking is whether he has free will or not. The answer is yes or no.
Topic.
He said
Can
yes.
we get back
and
to
he
the
told you,
topic?
and he gave you the reason of what he gave you more of
If
what
somebody
that
asks me, do
actually
I have
means.
ice cream?
Not
If I-
interested in any
if somebody-
qualification. I'm
if
just
somebody-
interested in
if
knowing
somebody-
whether.
Hey
Oh my
guys, can we
God.
just see where Jack's going? Can we just see where
If somebody
Jack's
asks-
going? Let him
wait, hold
talk.
on. If somebody
Yeah, just
asks
let
me,
him
do I
talk.
have
Let
ice
him
cream?
talk.
If somebody says, do I have ice cream? And I say, I have chocolate ice
Lemma is simply this, right? If the evil is necessary for bringing about a greater good, then by God's lights, it's in no way undesirable, right? Now,
Well, you need to-
if it's not necessary, right, then it means that it is. Then it means that in virtue of being evil, it is undesirable, and God would prefer a different course of action. To say that he would prefer it, which is to say that he desires that it not happen, right? Given that he's an all-powerful and perfectly rational being, is to say that he would be moved to act to prevent that outcome from obtaining so that he could get the outcome that he really wants. That's the dilemma.
Well, I don't really... One, you need to define whether or not you're talking about temporally necessary or metaphysically necessary, first and foremost.
I don't know. I don't even understand what that terminology is, and I don't see
whether
how
or
it
not
has any
they are necessary
relevance
because
to
of events in the past, or whether they are metaphysically necessary.
I'm talking
for the
about
universe to obtain the way
necessary
that it
for
is.
bringing about some good, right? Do you understand that concept?
Well, you need to establish which category you're talking about, though. You can't just say this
Look,
when there are two categories.
do you understand what it means to say, right, that it's necessary that I take the train in order to get to Newark by 5 o'clock because I could not get there by walking, and those are the only two options? Do you understand that?
Hey guys, I'm just gonna let you all know I gotta go. Trey, this was a wonderful thing, but it's also become an opinion for me and not for the thing with Jack. So you guys have a great day.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but that's like a totally separate category, right? So you're talking about
I don't know what you mean by separate category. That's the category that's in play. That sense of necessary,
because there's a third
right?
option there,
What
Jack.
is
You
required?
categorically don't have to walk or take the train. You're not metaphysically necessary to take either.
I'm trying to explain something to you, and then you just start talking when I'm in the middle of talking. It's what is required to bring about some aim, right? So if that thing did not obtain, that aim would not obtain, right? That's what's being talked about.
Yeah, but those acts themselves aren't metaphysically necessary. They might be temporally necessary.
I'm asking this question, right?
It's not a clear question. Redefine it and rework it because it's not clear.
I don't think that this is going to go anywhere. This guy
Yeah,
just
I don't know,
can't.
because you're not
help
asking a
himself.
clear
It's
question.
very weird. Like Logibear, you don't think there are like things that are necessary to achieve certain aims?
Yeah, those things in which we call like metaphysically necessary are things that could not be the case otherwise.
I didn't say anything
what
about
Jack's
metaphysical
describing
necessity.
That is entailed by the term necessary. You're using it vaguely.
Oh, it isn't.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
It
is.
isn't.
Necessary things. Like, have you read a metaphysics textbook? This is like a very foundational principle in metaphysics. Whether or not things are necessary metaphysically or temporally, it's two separate categories. Because contingent things become temporally necessary whenever they happen in time.
I think we're just dealing with a gibberish generator.
It's, okay, so you just don't care about philosophy, then.
I think you're just very confused.
I'm gonna just answer the question.
Can I respond, please? Because I haven't
Jack,
been
you
able
sound confused. Like, what are you
Let
talking
me
about? You don't even know
respond.
what
I
he's
don't
saying.
care
Bro,
whether you
K-Rob,
think I'm
K-Rob. Nothing. Listen. He's saying he doesn't understand what we mean by necessary when we give it in the definition.
Okay,
We're saying,
but then he's calling us confused.
what'd you say? He's saying there's only two categories. We're providing another category.
No, you're not.
no,
You're
what-
just saying this thing is necessary whenever I have to do some particular act. But
Yeah,
that's not true.
Yeah, the aim.
It's a loose way of using the term necessary because you could just not act.
Have you never
So
heard
it's not
anybody
metaphysically necessary, and it's not even temporally necessary
Question
because it's a
is,
future contingent
look,
event.
Well, here's
Oh
the
my
thing,
God.
though. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. When you keep talking about metaphysical versus temporal, you're talking about very specific things within philosophy. What he's referring to, or I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jack. What he's referring to is like in the reality sense, because there's a certain way to believe in the Bible where if you really want to get down to like how to answer these questions, you need to think about this realistically rather than metaphysically, and like what could be possible or like what all these things. Like let's just like actually read the scriptures and then actually answer the question of why, like what is necessary.
The
versus
issue is
what not.
simply, is there an action that God can undertake, right, to bring about that end without the accompanying evil? He have that choice, right? He's trying to decide, look, I
Give an
want this
example.
thing.
Let's talk in the concrete. Give an example. God wants to bring about X aim. Let's talk about
Okay.
it.
Well, you pick. It's your guys who are trying to
You're the
defend
one
this
making the
idea.
argument. I can't make your argument for you.
I'm
Take an
simply
example and let's talk
asking
about it.
whether there's anything that obtains by God's lights which is undesirable.
Give me a example, a concrete example.
What's something you think is evil?
Just give me an example. You are giving the argument here. You need to
Sin.
provide
Look,
an
let's
example.
say let's take Auschwitz, right? So
Perfect.
God has a choice. Should I intervene to prevent Auschwitz from obtaining, or should I not intervene? Right? Now, some people want to say, well, by letting Auschwitz obtain, some greater goods result. Let's say redemptive redemption, the exercise of compassion, the exercise of other virtues, the acquisition of moral knowledge, whatever, anything that you think is some greater good that's made possible by not preventing Auschwitz from obtaining, right? Well, I'm just asking, does God have a choice to say, well, I want those things to be, to obtain, but I'd rather have those things obtain without the Auschwitz occurring, right? Can I, God, undertake an action to bring that about? And if the answer is no, right, then I don't understand what it means to say that it's undesirable for God that they obtained, because God would never say, gee, this shouldn't occur, I'd better stop it, right? Which is what we're taking undesirable to mean in this context.
No.
Right?
Undesirable does not necessitate intervention or stopping.
I'm saying
things.
that's
so
what it
I
means
just
in this
categorically
context.
disagree.
Well, you're disagreeing with the definition, right? And that's not.
Because I think your definition isn't clear.
No,
I think
what do you
it's
mean
just
it's
the
not
wrong
clear?
definition.
I don't
It's
know what you
not
mean
the
by a
right
wrong
definition.
definition. See, like, Trey, what are you supposed to do with people like this?
Yeah. People
Well, what
who
you
just
do is
make up
you
their own
actually
definitions.
redefine your argument and make it make sense. Because if you're
Nothing
wanting to
that
say
doesn't
that
make
God
sense about
must
it. You're just
intervene or it
disagreeing
becomes
with how a
necessary,
word is being used.
Hey Trey, this is like the third time I've seen Jack make up definitions and try to apply
Now,
them
this
to
we
us.
really don't. This we
And
really
it
don't
never
need to
works
hear.
out.
Yeah, this we really
I
don't
know
need
we
to
don't.
hear.
I know we don't
J-Rob,
do it.
you've never heard the term necessary be used as just a need?
Well, that's
He's
not what
disagreeing with the term
we're not talking about.
undesirable.
We're not talking about. We're
Right.
not talking about necessary. We're talking about undesirable. Just like he made up a definition for to oppose. Like he made up a definition
Look,
for oppose.
this
lead to
debate about
prevent.
definitions is just not of any interest, right? This is how the term. This
Of
is how it's
course.
being understood in terms
Make
of the
up your no. This is how you.
Yeah, well, the way it's being understood in terms of your argument necessitates
Guys,
a
I mean,
certain
you
outcome
guys-
that it's categorically incoherent with the Christian worldview.
Oh my
so you're trying to
God.
make an argument.
Look,
in
if
an
you're just
internal
saying
critique.
God, if you're just saying that these things
Trey,
are not
Trey.
undesirable as defined in terms of the argument by
Trey,
God's lights,
Trey.
that's fine. You can
Trey,
say that.
Trey,
But they
Trey,
can
be
be
honest.
undesirable and they
Be
still
honest.
obtain,
Wait, hold
even in
on,
God's
hold on.
lights. That's
Hold
the
on,
part
hold
I'm
on.
I
disagreeing
don't understand
with.
why you have
Are
an
you
issue with what he's
equivocating
saying.
on undesirable there, or are you using it in the sense that I mean?
Hold
Well,
on,
you haven't
Logic
defined
Jack.
it, so let's hear it.
Did
Hold on
define
real
it,
quick.
right? I'm saying that what it means for something to be undesirable, right, is that for a rational being, right, it potentially rationalizes an action to stop it in virtue of the fact that it's undesirable, right?
But then I disagreed with you, and then you just said, "Well, we're just arguing about
Disagreeing
definitions."
with the definition, right?
But
I'm not interested in you disagreeing
what
with the
else am I supposed to
definition.
disagree with there?
Wait,
Just
why
to
do you
say-
disagree with that definition?
Yeah, because just
Because I
something-
don't think there's any obligation to that causes someone to say I must intervene or I need to intervene, even if it is undesirable.
I'm just
I don't think
understanding. That's just how I'm understanding undesirable here.
But that's not how we
Okay,
should
that's
understand
not-
undesirable.
I know what
Something
you
can
mean
be
by how we should
undesirable without
understand
any
it, how we
obligation
should
to intervene
understand.
and stop it.
Well, I could actually make
Yeah.
an argument for what
Jesus
Jack
Yeah,
said.
wait, hold on. It's undesirable for my wife to leave me, but I love her so much that I'm not going to stop her from leaving me if she wants to leave me. That just sounds ridiculous.
Look, I'm interested in a concept of desirability that makes normative demands upon agents, right?
Well, nobody,
So what-
nobody
but categorically, that doesn't
Oh my
exist in
God! Why
Christianity.
is there? Why do
Yeah,
you
our-
stop?
our-
Look,
our- our-
that's
our-
fine.
our-
Oh my God! You people just
taking
cannot
the-
help yourselves.
It does exist, though.
Why are you
The
talking?
issue,
So I'm interested in a concept of desirability that's normative, right? And what I mean by that is that it generates normative demands upon agents, which is to say, right, that when something is undesirable, it provides a reason, right, for a person to oppose it, right? It potentially rationalizes an action, right? So I'm not talking about undesirability in a sense where an agent could not, in any conceivable situation, right, select one outcome over the other, right? I'm talking about things that make a difference, right, to the agent as an actor, right? He has to decide, should this obtain or not? And if it should not, then he has a reason to act in such a way as to prevent it from obtaining or cause it to cease obtaining if he can, right? That's the concept of desirability in play here.
Well, like I said, we don't hold to that term to be desirable or undesirable.
Talking about the term,
okay,
about the
I'm just saying.
concept.
I'm just saying the concept is not a lack of desirability or something being indesirable.
You're
So
just
if you
not
want-
understanding, right?
No,
Okay, I think I got where you're coming from, Jack.
J-Rob keeps thinking of the cheating example. I don't know why he keeps bringing up that example as if that
The cheating
pertains.
example. Yeah, because the definition, because this is like the second time he's used definitions that we don't agree to, but he's trying to run an argument
I don't
to say
understand
that.
why. But what? Look,
Yeah,
this agreeing to
Trey,
definitions thing.
Wait, Trey, because this is not the first time, right? Even Logi did.
Trey,
He
you
wasn't in the
understand
conversation.
that it doesn't make sense to say
Wait,
it doesn't
Logi
make
just says
sense.
he understands now.
It doesn't make sense in this context to say he doesn't agree
understands,
to a
but
definition,
I'm sure
right?
Logi doesn't agree.
But I
with
just
that
want to
definition.
get.
Yeah,
I
it
just,
makes total definition. Okay, first and foremost, let me just kind of get what Jack's after. So Jack, the problem is that God just simply has enough reasons to allow Auschwitz to obtain.
Great. So that
Period.
means. So
That-
what I'm
that's
asking
the
is,
answer.
I'm asking in any sense, by God's lights, is Auschwitz undesirable?
Yes, it is.
So now, in the sense,
it is
in the
undesirable.
sense, right? So in the sense of undesirable here, at play here, right? It potentially rationalizes some action for God to stop it, right? So under what conditions does God do that?
Whenever whatever goods that come out of it
Under
are
what
not
conditions
outweighed.
does God? Yeah. So what are the conditions under which God acts to stop Auschwitz?
Let's see here. The total eradication of everyone on the planet might be sufficient, but even then, we would just simply say something like, "God's already intervened and sufficed for Auschwitz's evil through Christ on the cross." So we would say, even with all of the evil that obtained by Auschwitz, it's already wrapped up.
No, it's
in the
not
blood of
prevented.
Christ. But it doesn't have to be prevented, because all of
Look,
the evil
the
that
notion-
obtains doesn't actually obtain, because there's nothing actually being obtained. There's something being lost. But everything that is lost has already been restored through Christ.
Look.
So under the Christian worldview, the problem of Auschwitz is not one such that the metaphysics of the deprivation of good that we have obtained, that's not the issue.
I don't think you're understanding the objection. So look, here's a way to think
Your
about
objection categorically doesn't hold
I
any
know.
weight in the
Look, I
Christian
don't care.
worldview,
Look,
though.
I'm not interested in that opinion. I'm just interested in you addressing the argument. Right?
I addressed the
And
issue.
you're not,
The issue
and
is
I
that
don't think
Auschwitz
you're
is
tracking
obtained.
it. Look, I'm trying to explain it to you.
Let Jack ride.
So look, you understand what it means to say that the pain caused by a vaccine administered to a child, right, to protect him from disease. You understand that what it means to say that pain is undesirable on this construal is that given a way to bring about the good of protecting the child from disease without causing the pain, I would be required to do so, right? Now, I'm limited in my capacity
Why?
to do that. What do you mean, why?
Why? Why are you required to do that?
That's what it means to say that it's a bad-making feature here, that it is an undesirable feature.
No, but you're just baking into your
No, but
definition.
if you saw
but you're just
a timeline where he learns from that pain.
Hold up, let Logi speak.
Jack, you're presuming and dumping into the term undesirable some moral act, but I don't hold that to be necessary. It's not necessary for things to be undesirable.
Look, I'm just saying that's what undesirable means in this context. If I say, look,
but if we're talking about a more nuanced conversation about definitions and what we mean by our terms, and someone's sitting here and says,
I don't care what you mean by the terms.
Well, then you don't care about the conversation, Jack. That's just what it gets down to.
Oh my God!
Find somebody that
oh my goodness, how are you guys? Listen, the definition is irrelevant. Hold on.
No, it's not.
But it's really not. Whenever you're presuming,
because if you conclude that God desires evil, then we don't agree with these terms, right? So I'm not going to.
I mean, how many times are we gonna listen to this?
Just hold on. Let him finish, because that's not. You guys don't even let him get to the point. You keep getting hung up on definitions.
So the issue is simply this, right? I'm interested in a concept of evil or badness, right? Where which is something like this, right? Causing pain to a child is bad, all else equal, right? Which is to say that everybody has reasons. Everybody has reasons to prevent children from experiencing pain, right? All else equal. Now, obviously, there could be conditions under which you might think, well, yeah, we do have reasons to prevent pain, but maybe sometimes there's some competing goods that outweigh the badness of the pain that would not be realized if we did act to prevent the pain, right? And so, the vaccination case is a typical example of that, right? We might think, yeah, I shouldn't cause this child pain, but I should protect him from disease, right? And the only means that I have access to at the moment, where, in the location of space and time that I am, right, is is a way of protecting him from disease that will cause him pain. So I weigh up the reasons. There are reasons that count in favor of protecting him from disease. There are reasons that count against causing him pain, right? And it may be that some pain is worth the price of protecting him from disease. And so the morally better action to undertake there is to administer the shot, even though it causes pain, because it will protect him from disease, and that's more important, right? Now, what I'm saying is that when we say, yes, it was the best thing to do there to administer the shot, right? But it's nonetheless undesirable that we cause the child pain, right? What I'm understanding that to mean in this context, right, is that were there a way to administer the vaccine, protect the child from disease without causing the pain, that would be the better course of action, right?
But it's not your place to say so, though. What if there's a timeline where that child learns from the pain? You will want to cause him pain, so he can.
Saying there's a fact of the matter about it. Whatever that fact is, right, what will lead to the greater good, right, is what is good.
Yeah, so the problem seems to be then that there isn't actually an objection here, right? Because then we would just simply say that any and all evil or future contingent evil events that obtain are simply just outweighed by the goods that they might bring about, and that's why God ordered it so, right? So I'm not sure where your objection is.
Objection is that there are no evils of the kind, right, where they could potentially rationalize an action for God to prefer the better outcome, right?
How are you defining it as better?
It's what,
right?
well,
because if
it's going to be what is more desirable by God's lights.
Okay, yeah, so God has already obtained and has set in motion, or however you want to parse out the divine fatalist / modalist / free will debate, however you want to define that out. God's will has already been that free will exists, and then because of his will for us to have free will, anything that is obtained by our free will is then counterweighed by Christ's redemption on the cross. So even if any future contingent event exists, there's not some sense of a greater metaphysical evil being done in our actual world. So you're just there's no objection here. There's no issue.
I'm telling you what the objection is, right? The
but
objection
it's not a true
is
objection.
In virtue of what?
Like you're just go ahead, redefine it. What is the objection?
The objection is, right, so take the vaccine case, right? So you might say, well,
I don't care about the vaccine case. Go ahead. Just state the objection.
Give me an example.
Yeah, I'm using that example to illustrate.
No, I already know the example, right? So
no, I don't think you do.
It is better.
I don't think you understand the merit of it, right? The point is, God in virtue of being omnipotent, right, can administer the vaccine, can protect the child from disease, right, without having to cause any pain. The connection between the pain, right, and the good outcome, protecting the child from disease, right, the reason why that bad-making feature is something unavoidable for us is because we're not omnipotent. We don't have access to better technology, right? We're limited in space and time, right? We're constrained by natural law, right? We're constrained by limits on our knowledge, right? But God is not limited by those constraints, right? And so the question is, right, how is it then that there could be something that's undesirable by God's lights that could obtain, given that he's omnipotent? Does that make it any clearer?
That's very simple, man.
No, it really doesn't, because all you're really saying is God is omnipotent and omniscient, and yet evil still exists. That's your objection, but it doesn't really help in your clarification.
The logical
here.
problem of evil is,
but that's
right?
Not,
It's saying that those two things are incompatible.
Fully solved by simply saying that God has some reason for allowing it. I could just say God has a reason for allowing that particular evil to obtain, and then the logical problem of evil is solved.
No.
So do you have something different, or
no? It just takes the other horn.
So the
point is,
what is the other horn? The gratuitous evil?
Look, I framed it as a dilemma, right? The dilemma,
but it's not a dilemma.
But it's,
there's no dilemma.
Do you understand? Do you understand what the purported dilemma? Jesus Christ! Do you understand what the purported?
I understand.
Okay,
your purported dilemma.
Restate it if you understand.
Right. It is that God, being omnipotent and omniscient, has the ability to give some sort of good without the need for evil. Yeah, that's horn one. Horn two. We still see, in reality, that there exists the arisal of evil for the sake of these goods that God wants to obtain, and therefore God needs something undesirable to obtain in order to bring those about. That's the dilemma, yeah?
Not quite, no. So the dilemma was this, right? I was saying, because somebody who was here, and maybe is still here, was saying that, I think it was Sean, was saying that God permits evils to obtain for the sake of a greater good, right? And so the dilemma was this, right? The dilemma was, well, if it's the case that that greater good is something that's made possible by that evil, in what sense would it be undesirable to God, right? Because if it's necessary for bringing about that greater good, right, then it's in all things considered good. That's one horn of the dilemma.
Well, that's
The
just
other
not a
horn,
true definition,
no.
right? So
Okay,
you can get back to definitions.
now we're back to this nonsense.
That's the point. Hold on, Nazi there. That's the point
Let me
of
just say
the
this real
vaccine.
quick,
Hold on.
because
Hold on. That was the point of of showing you the vaccine example, because
But the vaccine example doesn't do what he thinks it does. It's not uplifting his definitions of examples here. He's just pre-baking
but do you
into
think-
his
hold on,
questions.
Margie, do you think that the child should get the vaccine?
Yeah, all things considered, yes.
Yeah. And she should endure the pain that comes with that, right? That pain is necessary, right?
No,
The pain isn't necessary?
no, not in his example, because he said that God could just intervene and give her, right? Let's say God
No,
just
it's
intervenes and
necessary
makes it
for
the
us.
case that the child has the vaccine. Well, that's not what his example was. His example was in
That
God's
is what
light,
his
right?
example was.
No, his example was that it was in God's light.
He was saying that God isn't confined to that. But
I
you're
know,
saying
so I'm skipping over the human aspect because that's not what he was concerned with. That was
Okay,
just
so
a
the-
parallel.
okay, but
That
the
was just
pain
a parallel to get us to the God.
Yeah, the
part of his
pain
argument.
was parallel. The pain of that was parallel to the to evil. So all he's
Yeah,
saying is, okay, it seems like God doesn't need evil
then
to
he's
achieve
not-
those aims.
But what we're doing
So-
there is we're not being careful with what we're meaning, because like a kid getting a vaccine and then suffering pain isn't evil. Like there's no evil that obtains there.
You're still
So-
don't understand.
I do understand. I understand this example just fine. But the problem is if we're mixing words like suffering and evil, because they're not the
Exactly.
same thing.
no, it's
No,
not.
you misunderstood what he was
What
saying.
did I misunderstand? Because
saying-
I can
Hold on,
say
Steve,
exactly
You
what he
guys
just
are
said.
misunderstanding because you guys think that suffering is evil. Suffering's not always evil.
No, oh my God.
That's what the brother- that's what
Listen,
logic is saying.
No, you both are misunderstanding. The point was to show that all else being equal, the child should endure the pain in order to achieve the greater good. Just like we're saying, but the child
But
should.
he's also then wanting to come in and say, but God should not have to operate in this way because he is omnipotent. And he should
Okay,
be
he's
able
asking-
to skip over
okay, yeah.
all of the undesirable aspects, like pain, in order to bring about the greater good. That is his argument.
Precisely. Okay, so it's.
So what did I not understand?
No, he's asking if that's your view. If you
And
if
I
you-
said no, and then he gets like, oh, he's just disagreeing
Yeah,
with
so if that
definitions.
isn't your view, then he's saying then yeah, so that the evil is necessary to achieve the greater good.
That's not though.
If it's not
Well,
necessary,
I've already
he doesn't
agreed with
need
his
it.
horn
He
that
can prevent
God
it.
could do
No.
that. God could make it the case that the vaccine just appears in the child. But what I'm saying is that in the contingent span of events, that it is better that child suffer here on Earth in actuality, right? We can talk about hypothetical possible worlds all day long. But in actuality, our real world, God ordered it so that it is better for that child to endure the pain of the vaccine to bring about other greater goods,
That's what
rather
he's
than her
saying.
just having the vaccine without pain.
That's what he's
And I
saying.
agreed with that. But his further claim that God should act and be obligated to stop all undesirable outcomes, even if there are greater goods that do obtain, he should just bring about those greater goods without the evil outcome. I disagreed with that part, because that part is not necessary. There's no obligation on God's part to stop undesirable acts.
The definition of undesirable is.
But
in
it
this
doesn't entail
context-
any obligation. An undesirable act is just something that we don't like to happen.
So that's
That doesn't
again,
entail that
again,
there is obligation to
Jesus
stop.
Christ. I told you this is the concept of desirability in play here, right? So that is to say that when we say that the pain is undesirable, right, we have an obligation. Under conditions when we can prevent it, we have an
should.
obligation to do so, right?
Yes.
Right. Now, see, the problem is that when we look at the vaccine case, it's never going to be like that for God, right? Because
What do you
God
mean?
can always aim for the good in question here, bringing the child, protecting the child from disease without the accompanying evil, right?
Can he? I mean,
Yeah.
If God were to do that, then what we would say is all contingent events in which doctors get to be able to practice medicine, to develop and learn more about His creation, just disappear.
Saying,
Right. So
I'm
you're
saying,
bringing about
look,
different
you're not
examples,
understanding.
but
Oh my God!
but what
You're
I'm
not
saying is
understanding. You're responding to something that I'm
understand.
not. Oh my God.
I understand you completely.
Look,
You've already
I'm trying to
said that.
get you to.
Reiterated your
Oh
argument
my
right.
God. Let's say Let's say God's aim is to protect a child from disease, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's always the case, right, that if God is aiming at that, he can do so without causing pain, right?
I mean, maybe.
That's what it means for him to be omnipotent.
No, that's
Oh
not.
my God.
God having the ability to do every single act is not him being omnipotent.
What do you mean?
It's God has the ability to do all logically possible acts at any particular time.
Yeah, what's logically impossible? What's logically impossible about him administering a vaccine without accompanying pain? Where's the contradiction in that?
No, there's not, because we've already established that God has given us
You
libertarian
said,
free will, and it is God's will
look! You just said he can do anything that's logically possible, right? He can't do things that are contradictory, right? Now, is there a contradiction entailed by administering a vaccine without causing pain? Does that entail a contradiction?
In a vacuum case, no. In a actual real world application, which is all that really matters, the answer is yes. There is one obtained.
Is God confined to real world?
What happens?
Wait, is God confined to that?
Is God confined to what?
The real
doing acts within the real world? Yes. I would say. I would say yes. We're confining ourselves to that.
Honest.
Am I?
I don't think you guys are understanding when he says literally about libertarian free will. I don't think you guys understand the priors of that.
If we've already granted
talking about that right now, what we're talking about
but
is
that's
whether
part of what he's saying
right now.
Jack,
Look, listen, hey, what we're talking about,
Jack.
what
You're
we're talking.
over
Oh
me.
my
Let me
God,
talk.
Trey. What
Let
we're
me
talking
talk.
about. Oh my God. What we're talking about right now is whether it's the case that there would be any logical constraint upon God, right? If his aim were to administer a vaccine, right, in any possible world, right? In any possible world, right? If his aim were to administer a vaccine to a child, right, could he do so without causing pain?
So, can I please just take a stab at this, please?
No, if you bring up free will, I'm going to kick you. Like, we're not talking about
That's not what I'm talking about.
But we've
That's not my
already
main point I'm trying to talk
agreed
about.
with
You're
Jack.
missing what I'm
That's
saying.
the problem.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to say.
Now, I want to establish that for God, he can always eliminate the bad-making feature in question, right?
That's just not true.
Here. Okay, so what contradiction would be entailed by him administering a vaccine without causing pain?
In a vacuum, none.
I don't know what this in a vacuum stuff is.
I mean, it's like asking. It's a loaded question, right? So you're saying God can do this at any point, at any time, in any possible world, and then whenever we talk about the actual world, there brings about certain you just deny the existence of certain actions or reasons why God wouldn't do something.
If God said, look, what I really would like, right, is that this child get this vaccine, and there's nothing else, right, that I would like more, right? What I care most about right now is that this child obtain this vaccine, right, is protected from disease by this vaccine, right? That's my foremost aim. I'm God. That's my foremost aim right now, right? Under what conditions, right, is it the case that there would be some contradiction entailed by him undertaking to administer that vaccine to the child or to protect the child from disease without causing any pain to the child?
We've already said there wouldn't be a contradiction there. Can you move on?
Well, that was the whole point of this excursus, was that you had objected, right, that he can't always do that.
I didn't say that. That's not at all what I said. What I said
Trey.
was that he has reasons to not intervene in certain real-world applications. That was my whole argument. I never said that he couldn't intervene here. You just took that.
The point of the argument was to show that there was a disanalogy between us and God, right? The point was that when we say it's a bad-making feature, right, to cause the pain, that means that under conditions, right, where we can have the good aimed at without the accompanying bad feature, right, we would be required to do that. But we don't always have that access. What's interesting is that God does, right?
But
he's not constrained. He's not constrained by the things that we're constrained by with respect to the vaccine. We're constrained by limits of knowledge, limits of access, right? Limits of technology, limits of being constrained by natural law, things like that, right? God is constrained by none of those things. That's what it means for him to be omnipotent, right?
So let me ask you a question. Is it a bad-making property to bring about the end or to stop the bringing about of other unintended or consequential goods?
Yeah, the point is, if
So
those goods outweigh...
So it is a bad making property to stop the bringing about of unintended or consequential goods. Yes or no?
I don't understand what you're asking.
So, God does X action, right? Miraculously provides the vaccine for the child. God doing so stops the bringing about of accidental goods or consequential goods that would have arose otherwise besides him miraculously intervening in this instance.
Yeah, is that
a bad making property?
Yeah, it's a bad making property.
Okay, so what's the objection? Because if that is the case, then the answer to your initial objection is still the same. God has his reasons for not bringing about a miraculous stop to certain types of evil, and by not stopping those evils in a miraculous way, he brings about even greater accidental or contingent goods that are dependent on that action. But that doesn't tell you anything about the necessity of those evil actions.
About necessity
so your horn
is,
doesn't. Your argument is fallacious at best. If you wanted to say,
I don't look. Not interested in the attitudinizing. So look, the issue is, can he bring about those goods some other way?
Yeah, we already answered. Yeah, but if you were
to
deny
what I'm saying is, if.
But your question is
very simple. What he's saying. He's just
yeah,
saying.
But the problem is he's not taking into account the other contingent goods that come about.
I think you're getting.
I
think what you're getting confused about. Look, God aims for the best possible world, right? Now, can he have the best possible world without?
What is the best possible world?
Where the sums of the good outweigh the evils.
Okay, but why is that better? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to say that there are contingent goods that are better or worse than other contingent objects. But I've already denied that such a comparison actually is true in a metaphysical sense. I've already gone into a whole argument about that, because what you have whenever you have contingent objects having better making properties than other contingent objects is you have a runaway until you get to ultimately God at the core, right? So then you're just into an Anselmian spiral. Like, this is Anselm's objection to God.
Nonsense. Look, it's a simple point.
It's not.
Right?
You're literally saying that contingent objects have greater making properties.
Look.
Yes or no?
Jesus Christ. What I'm
yes
trying
or
to
no? Do contingent objects have greater making properties?
I'm not interested in that. So look.
Well, then you're not interested.
Look, if you don't want to participate, you can drop out any time, right? Right now, what I'm concerned with is you understand the idea that God aims at the best possible world, right?
You need to define what the best possible world is.
It's going to be the same. It's going to be that the goods that he gets the greatest. When you add up all the minuses and all the pluses, right? You're going to have some. You're going to have some, let's say, magnitude of goodness, right? That's left over, right? And so you can compare all the worlds with all the sums and minuses, right? And God is going to choose to actualize the one where he gets, which is ranked the highest in terms of those magnitudes of goodness, right?
Maybe, I don't know.
What do you mean, maybe you don't know, right? That's what the whole point of this is.
You need to actually make it clear. Like, just saying, oh, well, there are these things that we weigh, and then I think these make this world better. But you need to have some concrete actualization of what you mean by better. Better by what? By what standard is it better?
God's light.
God's standard. Exactly.
And okay, but then if it's God's light, then what's
think of it as you could think of it as a ranking of desires, right? You know, God might say, well, this world is a desirable world, right? I could create that world, but this is actually a better world. I'll create that one. And if there were a better one than that, then God would create that one, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, I just don't think that works with contingent objects. Metaphysically, it doesn't work, because you have a runaway, right? Because if I continue to add greater making properties to these possible worlds, eventually I'm just going to get to some definition of God. That's Anselm's objection to these types of claims.
I just don't know how to deal with the gibberish. Trey.
That's not gibberish. That's a literal answer to your question. Why
are you denying that? Are you denying that God thinks some worlds are more desirable than others?
I'm saying that
that's a yes or no question.
Clarify what you mean by undesirable.
You don't understand what it means to say that God prefers some worlds over others? That he thinks some worlds are better than others?
God thinks that a world that is comprised of nothing but hellions is obviously a worse world morally.
Great, so you understand the concept. Why are you objecting to it then?
Because
you understand the fucking concept, right? So I'm saying, does God aim at the better worlds rather than the worse worlds? And when given a choice between better worlds, does he aim at the best one? You understand that?
I get it, but what I'm needing you to do is to provide some kind of
now
evidence
that you understand, now that you understand, oh my God, now you just won't stop. Now you understand the concept. Good, we can move past it. Right? God aims at the best possible world.
You're intuition dumping.
Sorry.
You haven't defended clearly.
God aims at the best possible world. Stop talking while I'm talking. I'm getting fed up with that bullshit. Stop over-talking me and just fucking listen. So, God aims at the best possible world, right? Now the question is, okay, so now you're fucking denying it. Now you're fucking denying that God aims at the best possible world, right?
You have to define what best possible world is.
You don't understand what it means to say that God prefers some worlds over others? You were the one who fucking brought up the example that he wouldn't prefer a world in which there was infinite evil, right? So you understand what it means to rank them, right? You understand that, right? You understand what it means for God to rank the worlds, right?
You need to establish some type of standard, right? Your intuition.
The standard is God's fucking desires!
Yeah, lots of it's not that
the
hard.
standard is what God thinks is preferable. That's the standard, right?
Okay, so let's go with that. Where does your objection lead? Nowhere, because God has already actualized.
Did I ask you to tell me your opinion about where the argument leads? Did I ask you that? I don't give a fuck about whether you think the argument is good or not, right? I don't care. Stop opining about the argument. Stop it. We're not interested in that. I'm interested in you addressing the argument, not in opining about it. Hey, you're talking again. Okay, so now we agree that God aims at the best possible world, right?
You told me to stop talking. Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I asked you a question.
Just go with your argument. I'm not going to answer your question. Just assume I said yes.
Yeah, so God aims at the best possible world, right? Now, the issue is that these so-called evils, right, that God permits for the sake of bringing about a greater good, right? The problem is that there's a dilemma. The dilemma is, well, are they necessary? If they're necessary, right, then it's not the case that God would ever choose to not have those evils obtain. In no possible world would God choose that those evils not obtain, right? Because if he did so, if he did choose that they not obtain, right, then he'd get a worse world, the world which where the greatest goods would not be realized, right? So he's aiming at the greatest goods, right? And some events or actions or states of affairs, right, are required to obtain in order to bring about those greatest goods. They're necessary, right? And what I'm saying is, right, if they are necessary, then in no sense are they undesirable, right? Because when we understand desirability in this action guiding sense, it would never guide God. It would never, the fact that they were undesirable would never guide God, right, to seek that they don't obtain, right? Now, the other horn of the dilemma is to say that they're not necessary, right? Well, if they're not necessary and he can achieve those greatest goods without them, then they are undesirable, right? And then a rational actor like God would always act to choose the course of action without those bad-making features, because they're eliminable. That's what it means to say they're not necessary. They're eliminable. And in virtue of being undesirable in the sense specified here, right, he'd be rationally required to prefer the course of action where he could achieve those greatest goods without the bad-making features, the undesirable features, right? That's the dilemma.
But the dilemma only exists if you necessitate that undesirable and desirable things are guiding and push upon agents a obligation to...
I told you from the outset that's the concept that's in play in the argument.
But
yeah, I don't know why you keep objecting.
Before you even started talking... Wait. 20 minutes before he started talking, I objected to that very thing.
Wait, you don't think desires are action guiding?
I don't think that they entail obligation to act. No.
That's... The problem of evil, right, starts from an assumption that what it means to be a good being is that such a being is opposed to evil, right? All else equal. He's opposed to evil. If you understand good and evil in some other sense, there's no logical problem of evil, right? But what the logical problem of evil is saying is if we start from the concept of a good being is someone who is opposed to evil, right? evil and good are things that are opposed, right? Things that are evil are not good. Things that are good are not evil, right? They're in conflict with one another. Good persons seek to eliminate evils, right? Evil people seek to eliminate goods, right? If you start from that concept and you grant that God has the properties, the tri-omni properties of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence, right? That it's not going to be compatible for such evils to obtain with a being that has those properties. That's what the logical problem of evil is based on. Now, if you say, well, when I say God is good, I don't actually think that he's opposed to evil. I think it's compatible with the way I'm understanding God's goodness, that he's indifferent to the existence of evil, right? Indifferent in the sense that he doesn't have any reason to undertake actions, which, given that he's rational, he would act on, right? To oppose the evils, right? Then there's no logical problem of evil for you, right? But if you do think that when you say God is good, he's not a morally indifferent being, right? He's a being who has a robust commitment to eliminating evils where he can, right? Then you have to address the argument.
But I've already answered your question, right? Because all of the evil that obtains, future contingent evil, current existent evil, has already been assumed and addressed in Christ. So we're back to that, but I'm not sure exactly where your objection to Christianity's answer to the problem of evil lies.
How is it an answer?
How is Christ assuming all of the evil of the world upon himself not an answer to the problem of evil?
So look, are those putative evils, are they necessary for bringing about the greater good?
As you use those terms, no.
Great. So then that just means that if God is good in the sense that I've defined, right, where he's distinguished from being indifferent to evil, he has a reason to oppose those things, right?
Yeah,
and what I'm asking is, in virtue of the fact that he's omnipotent, what constraint is there upon him from successfully opposing them?
Your question doesn't apply to the Judeo-Christian God, though, because there's already an answer and a constraint put upon him.
Are you granting that God has the properties as I've defined them?
No. I answered that.
Great, so there's no logical problem of evil then.
But we established that 20 minutes ago, Jack. Right, so that's why I'm not Christian, because you're saying the problem of evil debunks Christianity, and it clearly doesn't.
I'm not saying it debunks Christianity. I'm not saying it debunks Christianity. I'm saying it debunks. I'm saying it debunks any Christianity which affirms that God is a tri-omni being, right? Where God's perfect goodness is understood in the robust sense of opposing evil, right? And where evil obtains. That type of Christianity is not logically coherent. So the argument
it is because he's already done that through Christ. Right? That's the answer, but you're just saying that's not true.
So I asked you, right?
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Is it true that in Christianity all evil is assumed by Christ on the cross? All evil, including future contingent evil.
I don't even know. I don't even know what that means. But it doesn't matter what I think about it. It just matters what you think.
Well, it certainly does matter, because if you don't know if Christ's death on the cross covers and obtains all possible future contingent evil, then that makes a big difference in what Christianity you're talking about.
So the question is, and I'll just restate the question I offered
I need an
before.
answer to mine first, yes or no?
I don't understand your question, but it doesn't matter, right? The point is, there's this evil that you're affirming exists, right? And I understand that it's evil in the sense that I mean, something that all else equal ought not obtain, something like that, right? Now that evil, is it necessary for God to achieve, is the obtaining of that evil necessary for God to achieve the best possible world? Yes or no?
I need you to answer my question first.
Okay, Trey, what are we supposed to do with somebody like this?
You can answer his question, though, bro.
It's not him. It's not up to him. He's not a Christian. Why would he answer a question for a Christian?
Well, because it makes sense, Trey. If I'm going to be critiquing Christianity, I'm going to say that this type of definition for God is contradictory to any type of Christianity that has this as God's tri-omni part, whatever he wants to define God as. And he can't answer whether or not all future contingent evil is tied up in Christ's crucifixion on the cross. That's a big deal.
Look, if you think Christianity doesn't mean that God can, that God is an omnipotent being in the sense that he can actualize all logically possible worlds that he exists at, right? Then there's no logical problem of evil. If you think that Christianity does not affirm, right, that God knows all true propositions, right, then there's no logical problem of evil, right, for that type of Christianity. If you think that Christianity affirms that God is not a morally indifferent being in the sense that I've specified, meaning that he's opposed to the good, right, and is moved to act to oppose it, right, then there's no logical problem of evil. If you think that the evil that obtains, right, is not the kind that a good being would be moved to oppose, could he do so, right, then there's no logical problem of evil. But if you think all those four things obtain, then you have to answer this argument.
And the answer to the argument is Christ's crucifixion on the cross. He already moved to.
I think
to solve.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He's saying the moving isn't preventing. He's saying the moving is God, is Christ.
Yeah.
I'm simply asking,
so there's still no
is the
logical
evil
problem of evil, even if
I'm simply asking, is the evil that obtains necessary for God to achieve the greatest good?
I've already answered that. I'm not going to restate my answer.
His answer.
There's no.
Necessary? Well, good. So then in the terms of the argument, that just means that given that God is omnipotent, right, he would prefer, he would be rationally required to actualize the world where he could achieve the greatest possible goods, right, without those things, right, without those bad nature features. And so if he doesn't do so, that's a reductio.
Hold on, Jack. That is this world that he actualized. That is the world he actualized.
Exactly.
What's the response?
That's not true.
In no sense are those evils undesirable.
Why is that a problem, sin existing? Because all that's required for Jack's horn to be solved here is that, one, God has a reason for allowing evil to exist. Two, God, even though he knows all possible worlds and a world in which that evil does not arise from libertarian free will, he has to have sufficient reason to not actualize that world. He does. Number three, what's the reason? I don't know. God knows, though.
The reason,
so I don't have to give you I don't have to know God's mind and tell you the reason why he actualized this world as opposed to the one with libertarian free will that doesn't result in evil arising. I don't have to give you the reason. There just has to be one sufficient in God's mind, and there is.
We can even grant that. We're just saying it's needed. We're just asking if it's needed for the aims he wants to achieve.
But again, so that goes back to me saying no, it's not metaphysically necessary because he could have done the same thing in the world.
Okay, then he has reason to actualize the world where we have libertarian free will and no evil obtains.
He might, but he might have better reasons to actualize this world.
No, he doesn't.
As long as he does, as long as he has a greater reason for actualizing this world, that one doesn't work.
No, if he has reasons to achieve the one world over the other one, if he has those reasons, then whatever those reasons are, the evil is going to be necessary for those reasons. You keep on, when we ask you, hey, is this necessary? You say, no, it's not necessary. But then you assign reasons for why the evils are necessary. If it's not necessary, he has better reasons to actualize the world where there's no evil.
No, Trey, this goes back to my distinction. The evils that obtain in our world are temporally necessary. They're not metaphysically necessary. They did not have to happen this way in order for the world to obtain.
Creation. No, we're talking about in the selection of God, of the world that God chooses.
Yeah,
we're talking about he selects. He selects the world where agents have liberty.
You're shifting the temporal necessity of evil that obtains in our actual world to the metaphysics of our world, and that's just not the case.
We're talking about this decision being made prior to creation.
Prior to creation, this is still a contingent world.
Wait, what?
So our world is a contingent world prior to its existence, yes?
Yeah, any world is.
Okay. So prior to its creation, and at its creation in Genesis...
Okay, bye.
At its creation in Genesis, has evil attained in the world? Yes or no?
No, there's no evil.
There is no evil in the world at the time God creates it. So did God create, we'll use Jack's explanation, the best possible world in that instance, temporally, yes or no?
We're talking about the world that never obtains evil.
Okay. At the time of creation, there is no evil.
Uh-huh.
And God has desired that libertarian free will is what he wills for his creation, yes or no?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So now we have a world in which that exists all possible goods with no evil. And it has the good of libertarian free will.
Does evil obtain?
And God desires that we exercise our libertarian free will, and that's what God's will for the world is.
In that world, does evil obtain?
Look, I mean,
Yeah,
libertarian
sure.
free will is
Maybe.
consistent with no possibility of doing evil.
Oh yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, they
With
could have chose to
libertarian
do
free
that,
will.
but Jack, you run into a
No, I didn't
contradiction
say.
if you're saying.
I didn't say they
Hold
could
on,
have
Jack,
chosen
hold on,
that.
Jack.
You're not understanding
Jack.
what I said. You're not
Jack,
understanding what I said.
let
I
me
didn't
talk.
say. I didn't say it's compatible with them being able to do evil and never choosing to do so. I'm saying it's compatible with them not being able to do it.
Well, it's just not true. If they're not able to,
It is true. It is
If they're
true.
not
All
able to
libertarian.
commit less, go ask any libertarian free will person who believes in that.
Does
and
God
you
have
tell them
libertarian
they are
free will?
Yes.
Can he do evil?
No, because he's God.
I didn't ask
From
you
him
because.
comes-
I didn't ask you because. Can he do evil?
No.
Great. So it follows then that libertarian free will is compatible with not being able to do evil.
No one ever said it wasn't. What were you talking about?
You just
That's
said
not
it
my
wasn't.
objection. No, I didn't. What? No, what I'm saying is that
I need to start recording
I never said that libertarian free will was incompatible with not doing evil.
Saying
they
if
can
God
choose
wants,
not to do evil.
I'm saying if God wants. No, I didn't say they could choose not to do evil. I'm saying it's compatible with them not being able to do evil.
No, it's not. Libertarian
Yes,
free will is
yes,
not
it is.
compatible with not being allowed to do something. Because
Not being. I didn't say not being
humans-
allowed. Right. Not having the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
That's not libertarian free will then.
You then
God have the capacity to do evil.
God doesn't have the capacity to do any
That's a
evil
yes
act.
or no question. Does he have the capacity to do evil?
No.
Does God have libertarian free will?
He has his own personal will. Whatever his
It's
will
a yes or no
is
question.
good.
Does he have libertarian free will?
All of the acts that God
Just a yes or no
endures.
question.
Well, your question is
What
categorically
are we
wrong.
dealing with here, Trey?
You answered earlier. You literally said yes earlier.
Yeah, if you define. So whenever we're talking about categories of being,
Do you think it's anything other than true or false?
yes.
No, you should
yeah,
be
I
able
think,
to.
I
So
think
it's something
that-
other than true or false that God has libertarian free will?
Yeah. So if we're talking about categories,
Okay,
of
so then
being,
what other than
and
true
we
or
want to
false?
ascribe a
Wait, the proposition God has libertarian free will. What other than true or false can that be?
Well, no, okay. Rephrasing. It is only true
There
or
is
false,
no
but
other
it depends
truth
on what
value, right? It's binary. It's either true or false. Okay, so when he asks you a binary question, of course, just give the bivalent truth value. Either it's true that God has libertarian free will, or it's false. Unless you want to say you're agnostic on the view.
Well, let me clarify, right? So
No.
I would
Just
say-
answer the question.
Well, it depends on what you're defining as libertarian free will.
Oh, so
for
now
God.
you're unclear about what libertarian free will is? After this
No, I'm
entire
very clear
dialogue
about-
flow of not trying to clarify? Now all of a sudden
I'm
you
very
need
clear
clarity
about
as
what
to
it
what the
means,
word means?
but if
When
we
you
wanted to say
initially
that God-
invoked it? Really? Look, the sense of libertarian free will you were working with when you initially invoked it into the dialect. I just want to get clear. Does God have that type of libertarian free will like you already said from the outset? Yes or no?
The ability to choose any contingent.
Okay. Does
act?
he have
That's what
libertarian
you're
free
asking
will?
me? Does he have libertarian free will? God has the freedom and the ability to do any and all possible future and logical contingent acts. Yes.
Okay, so does he have libertarian free will? Yes or no?
Yes, because he has the ability to do any and
He
all
does have
logical possible
libertarian free
contingent
will.
acts.
Okay, so he has
Yeah.
libertarian free will. Okay, and he doesn't have the ability to do evil.
Yes, because doing evil is not
Okay,
something
so it's
that
not.
God
It's
does.
not. Okay, so it's not
There-
required
there is no
of
act in
libertarian
which
free
God
will
can.
that you have the
No,
capacity
because
to do
what
evil.
you're doing is
Wait, do
Listen.
you take it? Wait, do you take it that's logically required to satisfy libertarian free will? You have to have the capacity to do evil.
no.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So then it's not required that God designs agents with the capacity to do evil in order to have libertarian free will.
Evil
So
is against God.
the
My bad,
answer-
Logic Bear.
yeah.
But evil is
I-
against God. Why would he
No.
want to do
Let's not derail because nothing you're saying.
No, I'll answer. I'll answer. What it seems to be the case in your assessment of evil here is that it is something in which that God can cause to obtain. Yes or no?
Wait, but you agree God can create agents without the capacity to do evil in
I
libertarian
need to
free
know.
will.
I need to know is something.
I just want you to sign off on that.
I'll give an answer as soon as I have a clarifier. Does God have the capacity?
Wait, you need
to cause
clarification
evil
for what
to
I'm
obtain?
asking. Wait,
Yeah,
no, that's not
yeah.
a clarification. No, wait, that's not a
It
clarificatory
is a
question.
clarification, right?
Wait,
because
but
if you
that's
think,
not that's not a clarificatory question because it's not asking for the meaning of terms used in the inquiry, right? So it's not
No, it's
clarifying
getting
what
at
the
it's getting at
what
the
the
underlying
question is
assumptions
conveying.
of your
yeah,
terms.
so that's not a No, that's not a clarificatory question because it's not
By
asking anything
definition
about what
is.
I'm
asking you what you're meaning by
No,
your,
by
your terms
definition
in
isn't
your
because
question.
Wait, okay, so do you need me to repeat the question and then you can tell me which terms you need clarification on?
Yeah.
Okay, what I asked was, is it logically... Yeah, can God create creatures with libertarian free will and without the capacity to do evil?
I've already answered that. That answer is yes. I'm asking you about your earlier question.
What earlier question?
You asked whether or not, whenever we were talking about whether or not God had libertarian free will, in your statement, you said something to the effect of God can allow libertarian free will without evil obtaining. Is something... Can God cause evil to obtain? Oh, okay, you did, but sure. Let's just continue on. What are you saying?
Never even mentioned anything close to that. You're just not tracking at all.
Okay, well let's keep going. Let's hear the arguments.
Yeah, I mean, you can continue with Jack. Also, you did contradict yourself earlier when you said you didn't say that about the libertarian free will thing, but yeah, Jack can talk with you, I guess.
No, but let's see. Right, you're saying God has libertarian free will, but doesn't have the capacity to do evil. I'm saying he doesn't have that capacity, yet obtains free will, libertarian free will, in a different sense than humans do, because we're talking about two different categories of beings. So God, by definition, cannot do anything evil.
He doesn't have libertarian free will in the same sense. Now you're just equivocating.
But but it's not even an
equivocation. Is the meaning of the word identical?
Equivocation entails that you're using the terms in the same way.
Yeah, you're not using it in the same sense, right?
Of course not. We're talking about two separate types of beings.
Okay, so then
why would I use it in the same sense?
So you are equivocating. So when you talk about libertarian free will for creatures and for creator, God, those don't have identical definitions. Those have different, right?
Well, you would say they have the same definitions, but the range of actions would be drastically different.
Wait, look, is it logically required to have libertarian free will if you're a creature that you have the capacity to do evil?
If God creates you with the capacity
no, Cerebus paribus. Don't bake in any of that bullshit. Just answer my question. I didn't say anything about that.
Okay.
Yeah, just answer the question I asked.
As an agent, have the ability to choose all contingent things available to me, which was my definition. Well, you're just confusing my definition of libertarian free will, because my definition of libertarian free will entails...
If you have libertarian free will, if you have libertarian free will, is it required that you have the capacity to do evil?
No, it is the definition of libertarian free will that I was working...
Okay,
listen!
So it's not logically required.
All right. Hey, Trey, can I just talk so they can hear my definition again? Yeah, because it's been a minute since I've said it.
Yeah, but I don't know why you keep accepting things. But go ahead.
Well, they won't let me talk if I don't just grant them their initial position. But what I defined libertarian free will from the start was that any and all contingent acts that are logically possible for that agent. So evil acts are logically impossible for God. He has libertarian free will in a different sense than humans, but he still has libertarian free will.
How is it logically impossible?
How is what?
Is it logically impossible God does evil?
Because evil isn't something that God causes to obtain.
What?
Or could cause to obtain.
How is it logically impossible?
Yeah, that doesn't show any logical necessity.
It is logically impossible for an omnibenevolent being to obtain something evil. And this is why I asked him what he meant by evil obtaining, right? Because if we're going to say
is there any action that God can ever do that can ever be deemed evil, like anything?
No.
Okay, so then God is neither good.
Yeah, of course he is.
Wait, do you know the linguistic principle of relevant application, where for any predicate to be applied to a subject, the predicate must be inversely applied circumstantially. And if no action God can ever do would ever ascribe him being evil, then no action would ever ascribe him good. Thus, the predicate of good is actually weightless. It has no substantial no substantial application as a function of an adjective that God is good. Because if all actions of God, including God commanding you rape your brother, would be considered good, then there is no... And if we're understanding good to be opposed to evil, then there's no relevant demarcation between good and evil. So there's no relevant application of good. So God's not good, because good doesn't actually have any substantial content of the predicate. God's just not even good under your account, because good isn't even a substantial predicate.
No, I just axiomatically disagree with that, right? So
are we understanding good actions as actions that we would are opposed to evil actions?
What are you... first and foremost,
Are you understanding good actions as opposed to evil actions? It's the antithesis.
What are you getting at?
Yeah,
I don't know what you're asking.
Just answer the fucking question.
What are you
asking? Do you
asking?
understand good and evil to be asymmetric? That they're opposites? It's unclear about the question. You just might be slow, but look, do you understand evil and good to be like opposite?
No. Good is simply something that exists. Axiomatically.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean,
you obviously are just don't know what an axiom is. But look, when you say evil is just something
you're
that
sitting
exists,
here saying that these things are opposite. I'm saying I disagree with your premise.
An axiom is just a postulate of a formal system, dummy. An axiom isn't just like whatever you think an axiom is. Probably you think something like self-evident. You just really don't know what you're talking about. So I don't know. You're like using axiomatically and just like an obviously like categorically errorist context. But look, when you say good just exists, what is good?
God. Period. Right. So if I
wait, but you said there's no such thing as an opposed to good.
Yeah, I think anything that is less than the perfect standard of good is evil.
There's an opposite of God, right?
No.
Wait, there's no such thing as not God?
But you're not using that term in the same sense. You're saying there's God and not God. But what you're really getting at is the moral characteristics.
I asked you, is evil understood as opposed to good? And you said no. And then that's when I brought it to it not having relevant application. Then you said what you meant by good is God. And then there is going to be a negation of God, right? Not God. For any entity that isn't God is not God. So there is such thing as evil. But under your account, if all you mean by good is God, and I'm understanding evil to be opposed to good, then you're not even talking about good in any moral sense. All you mean by good is just a different name for God. Look, do you predicate God of being morally good? Because in the context of good you're using isn't even moral.
It's the only way you have good, if we're not talking about
wait, God's morally good?
Know, just general application, just lazy applications.
Is God morally good?
Yes.
So he does what he ought to do.
But there's no distinction in my worldview.
Wait,
that good
by
and
good
morally
I'm
good
talking
are not
about
the same thing.
Yeah, because what you mean by good is God, and by moral good we mean a certain set of guidelines, principles, or facts that contribute to obligations or motivation, or what influences certain correct like actions, right? Some certain set of like action guiding norms. Yeah, and if what you mean by good is God isn't going to be the principles or guidelines that carry out my decision making.
Yeah, but it should be. That's the whole debate, right?
Wait, when you say it should be, when you say should there, that just means if what you mean by should is just that which is good, and by should, that just becomes grammatically incoherent. Because what you said to be good is God, and should is understood to be normative language, which is identical to good. When I say you should do this, that means doing that is good. So when you say, so what the hell are you even saying? Obviously, you're not talking about good in an
equivocal sense there. I'm not talking about it's numerically identical to God whenever we act in accordance with what his will is.
This guy just gibberates. Jesus fuck. He literally just says the dumbest shit ever.
I mean, do you not
this
read
guy's
like
hilarious. No, you don't. That's the issue. You don't read philosophy. You're just being like a pseudo-intellect, saying that, oh, don't you read philosophy? Saying the dumbest shit ever. You obviously don't know philosophy.
What do you mean?
Look, you just said you take good. You're using good in the moral sense, and then you said what you meant by good was God. And then I said I'm talking about good in the sense of the way an ethicist would actually talk about good, which is things that guide actions, right? Correct actions. And then you said you are using it in that sense. And then you said should, like you're using good to be identical. A good action
would you rather
is
me
an
use
action
ought?
you should carry out. So,
would you rather me use ought?
What would that change? What would that change? Where are you talking about? What would I rather you say?
Because if what we're talking about is normative
so why are you
action,
bringing that up?
So because you're quibbling with.
Look, when I say I
should
do X, what do you understand that to mean?
You have a moral obligation of an imperative to do it.
Okay, you have a moral obligation. Okay, and when you say God is good, do you understand that to be God carries out his moral obligations?
God has in his entire
yes or no,
being
yes or no,
encompassed.
yes or no, yes or no.
It's okay.
Yes
yeah,
or
sure.
no.
I guess if you're going to be unclear.
Okay,
about it,
God carries out all his moral obligations. Okay, and when we say, do you take it that there's any action in the world or any event in the world that is impermissible? Like, do you think the Holocaust shouldn't have happened? Like, all things considered.
Yeah, the Holocaust should not have happened.
All things considered, the Holocaust shouldn't have happened. Okay, And if some agent has the capacity to stop something and it's morally good, they're morally obligated to do so. Okay, well, God didn't fulfill his moral obligations there.
Well, if and only if God doesn't have some other reason for it to obtain.
No, you're slow, right? Because what I said was all things considered.
No, if
right?
or...
No, wait.
If,
No, you are slow because I
if.
did... No,
You accepted all things considered.
But look, yeah, I said all things considered, which would mean there's no countervailing reasons to allow it to permit.
So there are...
Dummy.
So, all right, so then no. There are reasons
all
for the
things
Holocaust
considered,
to
it
have
should
happened.
happen.
All things considered.
Wait, all things considered, it should happen.
It could happen, yeah.
Okay, so the Holocaust is necessary to bring about the best possible world?
No.
Oh, wait, it's not necessary. So all things considered shouldn't happen.
What? No, you're just misusing the word necessary.
Wait, shouldn't... No, wait. The way I'm understanding necessary is whether or not it's necessary as a means to an end, which is identical to the expression all things considered. If it's all things considered good, then that means considering all the facts it's good. And if it's necessary, that just means that in order to bring about the greatest good, it cannot be had.
Yeah, but just because it brings about greater goods doesn't entail the act itself is good. You're just assuming that.
Is it necessary to facilitate the greatest good? And the greatest good should be had?
Is it necessary to facilitate the greatest good?
Yes, if it's necessary, it is necessary. That's a tautology. Now, given that the greatest good is the greatest good, which means it's the thing we should strive towards, and this constitutive action is necessary to constitute the greatest good, then that action must be undertaken to bring about the best possible world.
Oh, okay. What's the...
Yeah, so there's no evil under your view. For any act that was, all things considered, impermissible, God would be morally obligated to stop it, and then there would be logical tension in him not stopping it. But you just extinguish this by saying, for any action that God doesn't impermit, just means God has countervailing moral reasons, that there's not this like deontological weight on God to impermit or extinguish the state of affairs from arising, such that there is no action that actually should. So there's no actual action, all things considered, that shouldn't happen under your view. So all actions, all things considered, should happen. Okay, so there is no such thing as evils in your view, or at least gratuitous evils.
Yeah, I don't think gratuitous evils exist. I've already answered that with Jack. I think all evil is assumed by Christ on the cross. There's no such thing as gratuitous evil. So if your little sister got raped, you would think that that is necessary to bring about the greatest possible world. No.
Wait, then God wouldn't permit it. Would. So that means the best thing is to have your little sister get raped. That would be the best thing as a means to an end for the greatest possible world. If it were necessary. Okay. Well, that's just your view. So the thousands, or at least the 13 million Jews that had died in the Holocaust, their deaths were necessary for the greatest possible good.
I mean, but it seems to me that you're just smuggling in certain baggage with the term necessary.
Those things happen.
But I just don't think that you're using the term clearly.
In what way am I not using it clearly?
I don't think they're metaphysically necessary. They might be temporally necessary for the contingent.
What is metaphysical necessity?
It could never not be the way that it is.
That's just repeating the modal scope, not the modality. All you said there was that it's necessary. I'm asking what is metaphysical necessity?
Yeah, metaphysical necessity obtains that in any and all possible worlds, it could never not be the way that it obtains. Like 2 + 2 in all possible worlds.
And this guy said, I haven't read philosophy? Jesus Christ, this guy is actually like a low tier, like Reddit theist who just jargons. He legit doesn't understand that he just repeated the modal scope. And in light of me asking what's the modality, and he thinks regurgitating the modal scope is informative as to what's the modality. This guy's actually just like such a waste of time.
You asked me what the definition of metaphysical necessity was.
Wait, let's just get clear. Do you think you actually defined metaphysical modality?
I didn't talk about modal claims at all.
No, I just want to get clear. Do you think you actually defined the word metaphysical modality there?
No, I didn't talk about modal claims at all.
Okay, what I asked you was to define metaphysical modality.
No, what you asked me was to define metaphysical necessity.
Yeah, look, oh my God, that's the same. Look, the modal scope is necessity. The modality is metaphysical.
I think probably we would have to try to explain to him what different modalities are, because I think he probably isn't really that familiar with how that's understood in metaphysics. in analytic metaphysics anyway. Right? There's like different types of modalities. Like there's logical modality, so that's concerned with logical necessity, impossibility, and possibility.
Yeah, that would be something like Jack and Sally have 2 kids, 1 daughter, 1 son. One's named Jim, the other daughter is named Mary. Therefore, Jack and Sally have 1 son is a logical modal necessity.
Well, so all it
Like,
means,
I'm following you.
all it means for something to be logically necessary is that its model would entail a contradiction. Right. And that's going to be distinguished from, say, something like natural necessity, which is going to be that it's going to be defined in terms of like the natural laws that are taken to hold, right? So, it might be that at our world, traveling faster than the speed of light is impossible with respect to natural modality, or let's call it nomological. We might say it's nomologically impossible, right? Meaning that it would violate some natural law for it to obtain, right? So that's going to be the world in which those laws obtain is going to be a subset of the logically possible world. It's going to be a narrower modality. Nomological, a nomological modality is going to be a narrower modality than a logical modality. Right? It's going to be a subset of the set of possible worlds, right? Because you could say that traveling faster than the speed of light is not something that entails a contradiction. It merely entails a contradiction of a given law, right? But there could be worlds where there isn't. It's logically possible that there are worlds without those laws, and at some of those worlds, it might be possible to travel faster than the speed of light. So metaphysical modality, I'm not really sure why any of this is going to be relevant. I mean, sometimes these issues come up in the context of the logical problem of evil with respect to the free will defense. People talk about metaphysical necessity. But it's usually, people use the term metaphysical necessity and metaphysical possibility.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I guess it's the afternoon now. How's it going?
They use
Let's not interrupt.
They use those terms in different ways, but I think and it's not always clear, I think, what's meant by metaphysical necessity, because like in the case of logical necessity, all you have to do is appeal to the axioms of logic, right? What's in conformity with the axioms of logic is going to be logically possible, right? And what is not is going to be logically impossible, right? And
Yeah.
logical necessity, right? You just appeal to the given set of natural laws that hold, right? But with metaphysical necessity, it's often not really clear what it's supposed to be picking out, like what are the criteria. People have said different things, some of which themselves seem unclear. Like sometimes they'll say what is compatible with the metaphysical laws as opposed to the natural laws, right?
Yeah.
But it's usually taken to be some kind of midway modality between logical necessity and nomological necessity, or logical modality and nomological modality. It's usually taken to be some kind of intermediate modality, right? So what monkeyboy was just asking, what are the criteria that make something metaphysically possible or metaphysically impossible, as opposed to logically impossible or nomologically impossible?
Yeah, so to kind of jump off there, like what we mean to say whenever we're talking about the metaphysical necessity is the things that do actually obtain in our metaphysics could not be the way that they are or any other way. In actuality, sure, we can postulate like possible worlds, but what I mean by like what I'm talking about in particular is the actual world, and then the criteria in which we use to judge that is you would have your to be that way. You also have causal necessity there as well. But whenever I'm talking about temporal necessity, I'm talking about it in the same sense of Louis de Molina, whenever he writes in his treatise on God's foreknowledge and free will.
Molinism.
Yeah. Yeah, so whenever we have like contingent objects in our metaphysics, we would say something like, I am a contingent object metaphysically. I'm not necessary for this universe to obtain, so to speak.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Molinist, what the Molinist metaphysical view is. I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, of course, Plantinga did sort of famously bring up, well, he sort of rediscovered Molinist's solution to the problem of how you reconcile man's freedom with God's foreknowledge. He sort of rediscovered it, or he sort of reinvented it independently from knowing anything else. But sometimes it is brought up. It's a logical problem. It's not clear to me how Molinist metaphysics, that sort of instance, in any way is going to get around the objection that I raised. But I'm not sure what the reason why that's coming up in context.
Because I would hold that all of the like things you're claiming are evil acts that are obtaining are not like metaphysically necessary for the world. So like it's not the case that they necessarily exist to bring about the greatest good possible. Namely, because I just don't think that contingent objects can have great making properties in the same sense of like a necessary object would.
Yeah, so what I understand the idea to be, the Molinist idea to be, is that God has a choice, right? To now, I don't actually think the modalist view is coherent, but I don't actually have to argue that it's incoherent to show that I think it doesn't address the problem that I've raised, right? So we can leave aside,
Yeah, I'm only concerned with how Molina uses temporally necessary things. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. I don't need his enterprise to defend my theodicy.
Well, I understand the
You're low.
Sorry, what I understand the relevant modal distinction in Molinism to be, I mean, the way that Plantinga uses it, is he'll use this term metaphysically feasible or feasible, and that's sometimes understood some concept of metaphysical possibility or necessity, right? And so the idea is that it's logically possible that some agent placed in some circumstance would be, let's imagine an agent, Jerry, and if he were placed in some circumstance, C, he has a choice between A and B. It's logically possible that he do A rather than B, but in fact, were he in that circumstance, he would choose B, right? And so it's not feasible, or shall we say metaphysically possible, for God to actualize a world where that agent do A. Even though it's logically possible that there is a world where that agent does do A, it's not up to God. God does not have the power to actualize a world where the agent does A rather than B. That would be something that's not feasible for God, which is sometimes translated as metaphysically impossible.
But that's nothing to do with Molinism. You're right. It's not obtainable, he would say, unless he has causality. If it's a cooperative, arrangement with humans. That's what he would say. Transworld depravity. It's possible, but not obtainable. You're right. But I don't think it has anything to do with Molinism.
No, it is. The Molinist idea is that.
Yeah, there are underpinnings of Molinist thought when it comes to causality. In particular, in Plantinga's argument, he borrows a lot from Molina. Just presumptuously, it's not necessarily that it's explicit in his argumentation. It's just like the underpinnings of it.
Well, I mean, he didn't actually borrow from it in the sense he didn't actually know about it, right?
Yeah, he didn't know, but like the fundamental ideas are.
Yeah,
the presumptions and the ideas are the same.
Yeah, he came.
Would you say his weak actualization, where he just puts you in situations where he knows what you would do, would be the Molinist underpinnings of that possible world? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, but like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so whenever I'm saying something like, I think these evil acts are temporally necessary, all I'm saying is that they only it can only ever be that way because I'm a presentist, right? So like if I was a B theorist on like the time scale, which I'm not, but if I were, I would say something akin to, yeah, these things aren't even temporally necessary. But I think they're fixed in that same sense. Like you can't go back and ever stop Auschwitz from obtaining, so to speak. So they become temporally necessary. That's what that's Molina's big addition to the theological landscape there is.
I'm not understanding. So you understood what I meant by the distinction between...
Hang on, guys. I'm gonna step out for just a second.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I mean, I was trying to respond to him, so I don't... Maybe somebody wants to talk about something else.
Jack, are you running a logical problem? And then monkeyboy was talking about gratuitous evil from an evidentiary standpoint. Which problem of evil are you guys running?
I was running a logical problem of evil.
You don't think Plantinga's possibility of that we possibly have robust free will, we possibly can't make that logically possible world that's actualized, deals with that?
I don't think it's successful as a response, if that's what you mean.
Okay, you cut out what?
I don't think it's successful as a response, if that's what you mean.
Okay, yeah, that's what I mean. Typically, we would say evidential problem is harder than, because all we have to do is show possibilities in the Plantinga vein to stop the impossibility that the claim is that you can't have an all-good, all-powerful God and evil.
Yeah, I don't think Plantinga shows that there's a logically possible evil. I think, a logically possible counterexample. I think he was mistaken about that.
Can you support that? What do you mean exactly? What's your argument that he was mistaken?
Well, so in the way that we're understanding evil here, evil is something that there's a reason for some moral agent to seek to not obtain, right? And so if we understand God's goodness to mean he's not a morally indifferent being, he has a reason to prevent evil from obtaining, right? And so when Plantinga says that, God is constrained in that he can't actualize worlds where agents do not sin, I just take that to mean that God is an indifferent being, is indifferent to the evil that obtains.
What's your argument he's indifferent if he's just saying he can't do it without strong causality, actualization, meaning causality and impacting the robust free will? What's your argument that he's indifferent?
Yeah, because to say that he's not indifferent would mean that he would act to stop it, right? So, like, God has the power. God has the power to prevent any evil from obtaining, right? Mm-hmm. If he really didn't want people to, genocide, some population, or drop some bomb that would kill hundreds of thousands of people, he, in virtue of being omnipotent, has the power to stop that, right? So if he thinks that him not intervening brings about some greater good, right, then it just seems to me that it's unclear what it means to say that he thinks those things are undesirable, given that it doesn't potentially rationalize some action on God's part to oppose it.
Right. I think the way we would word it is a little differently, that a good God would eliminate evil whenever he can, unless he makes things worse, like impacting free will and some of the things there, or preventing a worse disaster or something like that.
Right. So God doesn't have the power to bring about a better world than the one he does bring about, right? The world he brings about is the best world. So in what sense are any of those evils undesirable? Because if they were undesirable, presumably they would rationalize some action on God's part to oppose them. And he doesn't undertake such an action, so in what sense is it undesirable?
Yeah, I think this is where that distinction I made earlier just comes. We're just going to keep butting up against it, because I think probably Plantinga would say something akin to, it doesn't really matter what's desirable or undesirable. It matters more to do with what God is actually going to cause to obtain. So I don't even think Plantinga would care about the desire or undesire aspect at all. Kind of like me. Like, that's where I fall. I just don't think he would care.
Well, what's undesirable is what is actually evil and what God has a reason for. So I don't think it's possible for him not to care and be engaged with the argument.
Yeah, but I think the question would still fall to whether or not like our definition is correct.
I don't know.
But that's a whole separate conversation that we don't want to get into.
Yeah, well,
which I'm fine with. Like I'm content just listening. I think this is going to be fun.
It almost, I could have it wrong here, Jack, but it almost sounds like you're just sort of restating the logical problem of evil without just by throwing in, well, God must be indifferent. Am I missing something?
I'm running a logical problem. And I'm just saying that given that God doesn't act to oppose these, he is indifferent.
What if he has sufficient reasons for allowing?
Well, what does it mean to say that he's not indifferent?
You're very low. What does it mean to say he's indifferent or not indifferent?
Yeah, what does it mean to say he's not indifferent?
Well, you kind of made the claim he's indifferent. I'd sort of like to know why not eliminating the Schmolikost means he's indifferent, for example.
Yeah, so I'm understanding a good being to be one that is opposed to evil, right? He seeks to eliminate evils wherever he can. That's what distinguishes him from an indifferent being, right? So, and what I'm understanding is something undesirable to God is to say that all else equal, he will act on that desire, which is to say that in the absence of some competing consideration, right, he will act on that desire, right? And so the question is, what, in virtue of what is it the case that something is undesirable to God, given that he never acts on that desire?
But the logical problem of evil is basically you're saying it's impossible that an all-good, all-powerful God could allow evil, and then you're sort of adding in, well, he must be indifferent. But all we have to do is show a possibility that he has a reason, maybe, possibly free will, robust free will that allows loving relationships, the ability to love him or reject him. That's a possibility right there that should just defeat the logical problem of evil, because you're saying it's impossible.
Yeah.
Free will is compatible with is logically compatible with agents not having the capacity to do evil things. So it can't be free will that makes evil possible, right?
Yeah, and okay, Jack, I think I can clarify a little bit more of what I was meaning whenever I was saying you're talking about two different categories. If you think back about 10 minutes ago, whenever I said God's libertarian free will and human libertarian free will wasn't the same, and I think it's pointed right there on the agent responsible, right? So for a human, we would say something akin to libertarian free will entails the ability to deprive the world of some sort of good, in which it's not possible for God to do that.
Well, you're not talking about libertarian free will there. You're talking about what Plantinga calls morally significant freedom, right? Morally significant freedom is defined as a type of freedom where one has the capacity to do evil, right? But that's not free will, right? Because God has free will, and he doesn't have the capacity to do evil. And presumably, in heaven, agents have free will, but they don't have the capacity to. So what human creatures, by say Plantinga's life, have is something called morally significant freedom, which God doesn't have, and which agents in heaven don't have.
And yet, the agents in heaven are there based on free will choices on earth. So there is some free will involved in an initial decision that gets you there.
Well, all I'm saying is there's no logical incompatibility between having free will, because agents in heaven have it and God has it, and not having the capacity to do evil.
Right. I mean, we would say that the free will that humans have is consistent with our character, and that the free will God has is consistent with his character, which is morally perfect.
Yeah, but see, the question is, why is it that morally significant freedom is something that agents need to have if God doesn't have it, and if creatures in heaven don't have it.
Well, creatures in heaven are there based on their decision, their free will earlier, for sure. We're not perfect beings like Logic was talking about. We're different. We're creatures, so it's a different situation.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, we're not perfect beings like God is with a morally perfect character, infinitely powerful and good being. We're creatures, and so apparently he wants us as value and us as morally free agents to choose him or reject him.
Well, okay, look, I think there's going to be a problem with that anyway, but even if we granted that, right, you could have the capacity for them to choose him or reject him without something like Auschwitz obtaining. Right.
I mean, that sounds like a gratuitous evidentiary problem of evil argument now. Are you moving to that from the logical?
No, I'm just sort of pointing out that it doesn't actually explain the existence of those evils.
Right.
But yeah, if you think that it's actually evil for men to choose God, to not choose God, right? If you think that's an evil, then I'm sort of asking to say that God thinks that's morally undesirable, right? What action does it potentially rationalize for God to seek it to not obtain?
What do you mean by seek it to not obtain? Can you clarify?
Yeah, so like if I'm a good person and I think something is evil, right, then I think, well, I will seek to prevent that thing from obtaining, given that it's evil, all else equal, right?
You're just saying that God wouldn't allow evil at all. I mean, especially something like an Auschwitz.
That's right.
Yeah, but my understanding of the logical problem is all we have to do is have a possibility that free will or God's value of it is sufficient to defeat the problem of evil, the logical problem. And some of these stuff you're bringing up are like, the evidential problem of evil, which is on probability.
We've already established that that free will isn't required, that you can have free will without having any evil at all. We've already established that.
You mean the logical possible world that Mackey brought up to Plantinga was possible? But Plantinga said not feasible or obtainable because it involves cooperative aspect of human free will or transworld depravity. So I don't know that we've established that world is possible. I mean, it's possible, but not obtainable, unless he has strong actualization, which impacts free will.
Wait, if it's possible, then what do you mean by it's not obtainable?
Because an omnipotent being can't necessarily force it if he without impacting free will, robust free will, because it depends on the people. Now he can make it happen, but it's not going to happen if it involves some people that are going to do evil.
Wait, so is there robust free will in heaven?
There is, some people think there's free will in heaven, and then you're in the presence of Christ, so you always choose the good there, but that's different. But these people are there based on their choices on earth, so I think that's just a continuation of their free will choice on earth, which they had.
Sorry, but the point is that free will doesn't logically require that agents have the capacity to do evil. We've already established that.
Well, that's for a perfect being. We said free will is consistent with one's character. And
no, all God has to do is give agents the possibility to libertarian freely choose between equally good outcomes. God could have made a world like that, right?
Because you disagree with Plantinga, who says you can't, right?
Well, obviously, Plantinga can't be right. Plantinga isn't claiming that God can't create a world where agents have the choice between equally good outcomes. He thinks that is possible. He thinks, however, that would be a worse world because he thinks that what would be a better world is if agents are not faced merely with choices between equal goods, right, but are faced with choices between goods and evils, right?
Well, he actually thinks I haven't read that part, but I know that he thinks that it's not feasible or obtainable because it involves a cooperative arrangement with humans.
No, you're incorrect. He doesn't think that.
I know that's correct.
Really. No, you're incorrect, right? What Plantinga says is not that libertarian free will, where agents
only have the capacity to choose between competing goods are impossible. What he says is impossible. What he says may be impossible, right, and which would defeat the logical problem, which he thinks would defeat the logical problem of evil, is that God does not necessarily, it's not metaphysically possible for God to actualize a world in which agents have morally significant freedom as opposed to libertarian free will, right, where all of them always choose the good. He's
Why
saying
did he
that
say
might
the
be
world? Go ahead.
he's saying that world might be metaphysically impossible, right?
Why did he say the world was not feasible? And then he commented about strong and weak
Yeah,
actualization.
I'm saying that's what he's saying is not feasible for God to create a world in which agents have morally significant freedom, right, and yet always freely choose to do the good.
And if that's not feasible, then that possibility of such that we can't, in weak actualization, we can't even reject him, which is important in our traditions to be able to love him or reject him. So I think it's just not obtainable, and it's just as possibly not attainable, then it defeats the logical problem, because you're saying it's impossible for God
Yeah,
to
what
allow
I'm
you.
saying is that it doesn't make sense to say those things are evil because they're not something that God actually cares about to the point where he would act to secure them. Right.
Talking about evil acts that he's indifferent to, you're talking about again?
Yeah, he's indifferent to whether somebody chooses him or not, right? Because it's not the case that he would ever undertake any action to prevent somebody from not choosing him. He just doesn't care whether people do that or not.
What's your argument that if he allows free will, that somehow, and he allows evil, that means he doesn't care or he's indifferent?
Well, that's just how I've defined. I'm understanding evil to be something that potentially rationalizes an action by a good agent to oppose it. And so if a good agent is somebody whose desires are coextensive with the good and desires potentially rationalize actions, to say that such and such action would be bad is just to say that it would be undesirable to God, which is just to say that God would would be moved to act in some circumstance to prevent that bad event from obtaining.
I think I'm all alone here now.
Oh, Jack went away.
Trey, you got anything?
I can hear you. I was just.
I'm gonna have to go back to work soon. But did you answer? Were you gonna answer my question, Jack, about whether if God hypothetically had sufficient reasons to allow free will and evil, that it would not necessarily mean indifferent, like you've assumed or applied?
Can you hear
to
me?
him?
Yeah, I thought I did answer that. I was
I'm sorry,
saying
I
that.
didn't hear you.
Yeah, I was saying that I'm understanding what it means to say something is evil. Is that a good being? There's a normative demand upon a good being to seek to prevent it from obtaining.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm understanding a good being to be is somebody who whose desires are coextensive with the good, right? Everything he desires is good. Everything that's good is something that he desires, right? And so if you understand a desire as something that potentially rationalizes an action, and you understand something being undesirable as something that potentially rationalizes an action, there's no world where the fact that God thinks this is undesirable potentially rationalizes some action by God to seek to prevent the action from obtaining. And that's
Cut out again.
I'm saying that's a contradiction, right? To say that it's undesirable and that God would never be moved to act on that desire.
So you said this obligation to eliminate evil would always outweigh any other, we would say, sufficient reason that God could allow it. In our case, we would say free will.
Yeah, I'm saying that if there's a competing reason, right, in what sense is it the case that it's undesirable if it doesn't potentially rationalize some action to oppose it?
So
we're not talking about God just going wah wah, I wish you hadn't done that, right? Which we might be in that position given that we are limited in power, right? We might think, had I had greater powers, right, I would have prevented that, but I can't, right? But since God is maximally powerful, there's no world, right, where any agent has greater powers than he already has, right? So God can't say, oh, I wish that hadn't happened. Had I had greater powers, I would have done something about it, right?
Well, you know what Plantinga accused Mackey of was Leibniz's lapse, which is just because you're omnipotent doesn't mean you can actuate a world that depends on human freedom.
Yeah. Well, I'm addressing that. I'm saying there is no world where God exists. I'm sorry, there's no world where anybody could do something about this thing that's being called evil, right? So in what sense is it undesirable?
Right. I appreciate your thoughts, and it's interesting that you're running the logical problem of evil, because when you look at the writings of the atheist, William Rowe, and everybody else, we're like, Plantinga just put this to bed.
Yeah, but how is Plantinga offering a response to the objection that I'm raising?
I mean, it sounds like to me you're just sort of restating it. A good God shouldn't allow evil. There's some obligation to not allow it, and nothing he can set up, whether it's free will, which you have issues with, that we would say has value to have loving relationships. You're saying that's not adequate to explain it, and we're just saying all we need to show is a possibility to defeat the fact that your claim, which is that there's impossible. That's sort of where we are.
You guys are claiming that these things are undesirable, right? And I'm just asking.
Evil acts.
Yeah, you're saying that by God's lights, these acts ought not obtain. That's what it means for them to be undesirable. And I'm just asking, what action does it potentially rationalize for God to oppose them? What action does it potentially rationalize? What action to potentially oppose them do these events or actions or states of affairs potentially rationalize for it to be meaningful to say that they're undesirable to God?
Well, yeah, I think we're sort of at an impasse, and I got to go back to work. But we would say, again, a good God would eliminate evil as long as it didn't make things worse. And
what's the answer to my question, though?
Well, the way you worded it, can you reword it? You talked about what rationalizes it?
Yeah, so these putatively evil events, actions, states of affairs, whatever they are, entities, whatever they are, right? What action upon God's part to oppose those things from obtaining, right, is potentially rationalized such that it's meaningful to say that they're undesirable to God?
You're saying that can you reword that? It just seems like a funky wording there about. Can you say it one more time? Sorry.
So
what? Yeah, I want to hear the wording again. Try to reword it simply. Yeah.
Well, I can try to explain the concept. I can try to explain what I mean by how actions, how it is that for something to be undesirable, it has to potentially rationalize an action to oppose it, right?
Yeah, I don't understand that wording. It's almost like, are you saying it is what's rational for God to allow it because he's actually against evil, but how could he allow it if he's against it? How could it be rational? Well, I'm not sure. I may be missing your logic, but I think we've kind of covered the possibility of why he would allow it. And we also asked for your argument of why he's really indifferent. We think that's just sort of assigning a conclusion based without argument.
Well, I gave an argument for that.
Yeah, he can reach his aims without the evil.
He can
yeah,
reach.
If he can bring something about, right, where he can have the putative evil
without the sorry, where he could have the good without the putative evil, and he doesn't do so, then that means he's indifferent.
So you
Sorry,
mean
I'll be right. I have to actually restart my phone. I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
All right.
Sorry.
So you mean, because you're contending that logically possible world can actually be feasible or obtainable, and Plantinga and others would say it's not. So that's kind of the difference there, and that a choice between goods would not allow us the freedom to reject God, which we would consider, which would be evil, but otherwise then the love is just forced, and we think there's a value to unforced love.
So then the evil is
what? Evil is
so then
what?
the evil is necessary.
No, I think logic addressed that. It's not
You say no,
necessary.
right.
It's never good. But the allowance of the robust free will to be able to make that choice is valuable and good, but not a choice to reject God is never going to be good. It's like a Trey. If you went over to monkeyboy's house and did something and stole his Xbox, it's never going to be good. Even if there's a secondary higher good like monkeyboy's forgiveness of you that would come out of it, doesn't mean the act was ever good.
Was the act of me getting the of me stealing
Xbox.
necessary for this?
No, it's a contingent
If
act.
it's,
You
yeah, if
really
it's not
indeterminate.
necessary,
You chose it.
if
You
it's not
chose it.
necessary, then God doesn't need it for any goods.
Well, the goods are in response. It's not just to have the goods. The goods are like, if you're going to have evil freely chosen, that there are goods that can come out of it that lead to character development, soul building, et cetera, et cetera. Hey,
Is
I'm
that
going to
what?
have to run.
Okay, you have to go.
What's that,
You
Trey?
have to go.
What's that, Trey?
Yeah,
Do you have one last
I
thing?
mean, we keep saying that if the evils are not necessary, and it seems like there's a possible world in which the agents have free will, and there's no evil.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how Jack was getting around that, but
Sorry,
Plantinga
I'm back now. So what was the
he was
question?
saying strong. Well, he's talking about the possible world again, but the possible world we always choose the good. He talked about strong actualization where it involves causality, weak actualization where he puts us into situations, and that just dependent on us, it takes us to that point that somebody's going to choose to do evil, with transworld depravity. So it's not obtainable. And if that's possibly true, then it is a defeater to the logic.
Yeah, we've heard all that. I'm asking how you address the objection. So I can try explaining the objection again, right?
Okay.
So here, what an indifferent being is a being who, when given a choice between something obtaining that's bad and not obtaining, is not moved to act to prevent it from obtaining or stop it from obtaining, right?
Right.
That's what an indifferent being is. Assuming he's not an evil being, right? Because an evil being presumably is aiming at evil. So if you are not aiming at evil, but are merely indifferent to evil, that's what is meant by an indifferent being. Now, are there exceptions? Sorry?
Could you define indifferent, please?
Yeah, somebody who is not moved to act, right, to prevent some evil from obtaining when he can, in the absence of some competing worse evil, right, that would obtain in virtue of him so acting.
It doesn't mean he doesn't care. You're just saying he allows that he doesn't act.
Well, I'm not talking about caring. Right?
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah, I'm just talking about
colloquial use of indifferent would connotate that, but that's not really what you mean, right? Doesn't mean he doesn't care.
I'm not saying anything about caring.
So
yeah, I'm just saying that like a good being, right, is not like that. He's distinguished from an indifferent being in that when he's presented with such a choice, right, he will be moved to act to prefer the state of affairs without the evil to the one with the evil, right? All else equal. Now, what the all else equal is capturing there is that obviously you could have a view that there could be competing goods and evils, right? So maybe so like take the case of a vaccine, right? You might think, yeah, it's bad that administering that shot with the vaccine would cause pain to a child. That's bad, right? So you might think, yeah, well, a good being would never cause pain to a child, would never administer a vaccine, right? But of course, the reason why a good being would do so is because to do so makes some competing good possible, right? Which is protecting the child from disease, and the goods of protecting the child from the good of protecting the child from disease outweighs the evil of the pain, right? But now to say that that thing is evil or a bad-making feature of the action, right, is to say that under conditions, that in the conditions where you could have the good without the bad, you would prefer them, right? You would, so if somebody said, well, look, in this drawer, there's actually another type of shot, another type of, injection device where you can actually administer a vaccine without, or administer injection of a vaccine without causing any pain, right? The indifferent being will be one who will say it doesn't make a difference, right? The good being is one who will say, no, we are morally required, right? And will therefore, in virtue of that, will act to choose the one without the accompanying bad-making feature, right? And so the idea then is to say that the pain is a bad-making feature, which is to say an undesirable feature, is to say that it potentially rationalizes an action on the part of an agent to seek that evil not obtain, all else equal, right? And we've specified the conditions under which they would do so, right? In the case where they had access to some type of shot that didn't cause pain and could administer the vaccine without causing the pain, that would be the one that they would prefer, right?
Yeah.
And so
Well,
what
like
I'm
I
saying,
said,
yeah.
I was just gonna say we would sort of be in agreement that a good God would eliminate evil unless he makes things worse or prevents the greater good. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's where we are, I think, on that, and the value of loving relationships freely chosen. Maybe I think that's a point of disagreement for us. And then I think we have a disagreement on that possible world that you think can be actualized, and I would agree with Plantinga that it possibly can't. I think that we can't even have any possibilities. If I'm running the logical problem of evil, I have to withstand all possibilities, and I'm not sure that you have there. But I do appreciate the conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the question that I'm asking you to think about is what action, when we say that somebody choosing to reject God is undesirable by God's lights, what action does it potentially rationalize on the part of God to seek that it not obtain? Because it just sounds to me like he's indifferent to it obtaining. And so it doesn't make sense to say that it's undesirable.
So let's say there's an evil act, okay, that could happen to you today or something like that. You're in a bank and somebody robs it. Are you saying that God's indifferent if he doesn't stop that bank robber from hurting you or something like that?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And
normally we would say, look, the free will thing, I don't really understand this because nobody cares about that, right? If you see somebody doing something bad, like about to torture a child or have sex with a child, right? You're just going to say, look, I don't care about that person's free will, right? I'm just going to prevent them from doing that, right? I'm indifferent to the good of their free will, right? I'm indifferent to that. But God clearly is indifferent, right, to the to all those things happening because he just stands idly by with his arms folded, doing nothing about it, right?
It's almost like you do float a little bit over into when you mentioned certain horrible cases. It reminds me of William Rose and others. I think it's Draper. Evidential problem of evil. The
no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point is, yeah, it's not the evidential problem. The point is
when you mention the Holocaust, stuff like that, it's like, and we would say there we would give greater goods, we would give soul building, character development, and we would also employ. We would employ skeptical theism, which is we don't necessarily.
None of those. Look, none of that matters. No, it doesn't. They don't work. None of those work. But it doesn't matter, right? I'm not running an evidential problem, right? I'm simply saying, in virtue of what? I'm simply saying, in virtue of what, right? Can we say that God is not indifferent to those things taking place, right? That's the question.
You'd have to show me that he doesn't have sufficient reasons to allow those things.
I understand that I'm granting for the sake of argument that he has a sufficient reason to allow them. I'm asking in virtue of what are they? No! I'm asking in virtue of what are they undesirable?
Are you conceding that he could have sufficient reasons?
Yes! I'm asking in virtue of what are they undesirable?
When you say in virtue of what? You're saying he has sufficient reasons to allow it.
Yeah.
But are they undesirable because they're evil?
No. No.
I'm
What
not
I'm saying
following
is,
what you're
what I'm
saying.
saying is to say that it's evil is to say that it's undesirable. And I'm asking, in virtue of what is it undesirable? Because the way that undesirability is understood in this argument is that something that's undesirable potentially rationalizes an action for good agents to oppose that thing from obtaining.
So you're defining undesirable as that it is automatically obligated to not allow it. Is that
Well,
what
I'm
you're
saying
saying?
I'm saying that it generates a normative demand that it not
Okay,
be
I
allowed.
think that's just. I'd like to see your argument for that definition.
I don't know what you mean by
Because I think
argue
it's
for a
just
definition,
well that
right?
you're that undesirable means you can't allow it.
I'm saying there's a normative demand not to allow it.
What does an argument for a definition look like? Definitions aren't propositions.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you can't
You
present an
sort of
argument for a
You
definition.
sort of smuggled in that undesirable means you can't allow it. I'm just saying how is that? How is undesirable defined that it means that?
He just explained how.
No, that's just his, and that's his
No, you said by
interpretation.
desirability, which is taken to be tantamount to evil, which is taken to be tantamount to potentially rationalizing some state of affairs, in which the state of affairs can't be realized. That's where the conflict comes up.
Yeah, and some of the, I think it's Jack's wording that it's a little bit hard to follow. But let's say he desires for monkeyboy to go to heaven and choose him, but he doesn't force it. That's a case where it'd be undesirable for you to be separated eternally, but he allows it. So it does not follow as a non sequitur that undesirable means he has to prevent that.
Nobody said anything about having to prevent it. What they said was there's a normative demand to do so, which means that there is a demand to do it if there is no competing. Sorry, that there is an obligation to do it if you can achieve the good in question without it, right?
Normative demand in what regard? From my home.
In the case of God, it would be an internal obligation.
And so you're assuming that he has an internal obligation if he finds something undesirable to prevent it?
If he thinks that such a thing is bad, that's what it would mean for him to think that it's bad, is that he has an internal obligation of that kind.
Yeah, I think that's just sort of bake that into the cake, because he doesn't desire evil, but he allows it for sufficient reasons you conceded he can have.
Again, when you say that those things are evils, I'm saying in virtue of what are they undesirable?
What do you mean in virtue of what? Put that in some other words.
Because what I'm saying is that for them to be undesirable, right, in the terms of the argument, that would mean that they potentially rationalize some action on God's part to seek them not obtaining, right? So what action does it potentially rationalize on God's part?
So that God would have an obligation to eliminate evil unless it makes things worse or prevents a greater good. And so if he has those sufficient reasons,
did you hear an answer? Did you hear the question that I asked?
It's obviously answered your question.
What was the question that I asked? What was the question that I asked?
You said, what action does it rationalize if it's undesirable?
Okay, so now what is the action that it rationalizes? Is there such an action?
You mean if it's undesirable to God, is it rational or obligated by normative demand to actually eliminate it? No.
Sorry,
point.
The argument proceeds from the assumption that for something to be undesirable to God, right, that means that it potentially rationalizes some action on the part of God, given that he's a good agent, to oppose that thing's being.
Allow it, right? For the logical problem of evil, you have to say it's impossible for him to have reasons, and it's possible that he was not obligated to eliminate the evil because he doesn't want to make things worse. He doesn't want to impact free will. He wants people to freely choose him, and he wants loving relationships. Those are all reasons. So your logical problem of evil fails again, dude.
Okay, so I asked you a question, right? We've agreed, right, for the purposes of the argument, that to say that it's undesirable by God's lights means that it potentially rationalizes an action, right? So for you to say that, you need to tell me what action it potentially rationalizes. Is there some world in which God says, you know what, it's so bad that this person choose to reject me that I will actually prevent it from coming into being? I will actually prevent that possibility from coming into being. Or is he indifferent to it in every world?
He had to go.
Yeah, guy's fucking dishonest.
Yeah, he is. I gotta go too.
All
I
right.
appreciate that.
Next time, though, I want to finish explaining that thing about Calvinism to you that I was explaining last time because my battery died.